The headline hit the internet at 6:47 a.m. Billionaire CEO Victoria Hale's secret affair with struggling waiter. Love or exploitation? Within hours, Ethan Walker's face was plastered across every tabloid in New York. Reporters camped outside his crumbling apartment building. His son's kindergarten teacher called, concerned about photographers at the school gates. His boss fired him over text. And somewhere across the city, in a glass tower that scraped the clouds, Victoria Hale sat in an emergency board meeting while her ex-boyfriend leaked more photos to the press. Neither of them had planned to fall in love. Neither had expected the world to tear them apart for it. But before we get to the scandal that nearly destroyed 2 lives, let me take you back to where it all started. On a freezing February morning when a single father and a billionaire CEO collided in the most unexpected way. Drop a comment below with your city so I can see how far this story reaches, and hit that like button if you believe love can cross any boundary. The alarm clock screamed at 4:30 a.m., shattering the fragile silence of the studio apartment. Ethan Walker's hand shot out from under the thin blanket, slapping the button with practiced precision. For a moment he lay still in the darkness, listening to the rhythm of his son's breathing from the pull-out couch 3 feet away. Noah, 5 years old. The only reason Ethan kept moving. He sat up slowly, careful not to wake the boy, and planted his feet on the cold floor. The radiator hadn't worked properly in 2 months, and the landlord kept promising to send someone. Ethan had stopped asking. He pulled on yesterday's jeans, a thermal shirt with a small hole near the collar, and the hoodie he'd owned since college, back when he'd believed in futures that included things like career paths and savings accounts. The bathroom mirror showed a man who looked older than 32, dark circles under gray eyes. Stubble he didn't have time to shave, hair that needed cutting but wouldn't get it until next month. He splashed cold water on his face and brushed his teeth, then walked the 6 steps back to the main room that served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen. Noah was still asleep, curled under the donated blanket with the superhero pattern, his small hand clutching the stuffed bear that had been a gift from his mother before she left. Before the cancer. Before Ethan's entire world condensed into this 400-square-foot box, and the constant calculation of which bills could wait another week. He made coffee in the machine he'd found at a thrift store, the kind that sputtered and hissed but still worked. While it brewed, he checked his phone. 3 missed calls from the restaurant. The breakfast shift needed someone to cover. He texted back immediately. On my way. Be there by 6. That meant waking Mrs. Chen next door early. Again. The elderly woman watched Noah before school started, refusing payment but accepting whatever groceries Ethan could spare. He hated asking. He asked anyway, because the alternative was leaving a 5-year-old alone, and that wasn't an option his conscience could survive. Ethan poured the coffee into a travel mug with a broken handle, grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door, and knelt beside Noah's couch. Hey, buddy, he whispered, brushing hair from his son's forehead. Daddy has to go to work a little early today. Mrs. Chen's going to come over, okay? Noah stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Is it morning? Almost. Go back to sleep. I'll see you tonight. Promise? The question hit like it always did, a reminder that promises had been broken before, that a 5-year-old shouldn't have to ask for guarantees that his father would come home. Promise, Ethan said, pressing a kiss to Noah's head. I love you. Love you too, Daddy. He texted Mrs. Chen, locked the apartment door, and took the stairs down 4 flights because the elevator had been broken for a month. The February air outside hit like a slap, wind cutting through his jacket as he hurried toward the subway station 6 blocks away. The city was just waking up, garbage trucks rumbling through streets, delivery vans double-parked outside bodegas, homeless men huddled in doorways with cardboard signs. Ethan kept his head down and walked fast. He had $47 in his bank account until Friday, a MetroCard with 2 rides left, and rent due in 9 days. The breakfast shift would help. Every shift helped. The subway platform was crowded with the early morning workforce, nurses ending overnight shifts, janitors heading to office buildings, delivery drivers clutching coffee cups. Ethan found a spot against the wall and closed his eyes, letting the rumble of approaching trains wash over him. He'd been a teacher once, 4th grade. He'd loved it. The way kids' faces lit up when they finally understood a concept, the notes parents sent thanking him for caring, the feeling that he was building something that mattered. Then Sarah got sick. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The medical bills piled up faster than insurance could cover them. He burned through their savings in 6 months, maxed out credit cards, took out loans he'd never be able to repay. She died 3 weeks before Noah's 4th birthday, and Ethan was left with a mountain of debt, a traumatized child, and a teaching salary that couldn't cover both. So he'd made a choice. He quit, moved to a cheaper apartment, and started working whatever jobs paid cash or offered flexible hours. Restaurants mostly. Delivery driving when he could borrow a car. Warehouse shifts on weekends when Mrs. Chen could take Noah for longer stretches. It wasn't a career. It was survival. The train screeched into the station. Ethan squeezed into the packed car, grabbed an overhead rail, and swayed with the motion as the subway hurtled downtown toward the restaurant district where Manhattan's elite paid $30 for avocado toast and $50 for eggs Benedict. He arrived at Aurelius at 5:52 a.m., using the employee entrance in the alley behind the building. The kitchen was already chaos. Line cooks shouting in Spanish, pans clanging, the head chef screaming about a missing shipment of truffles. Ethan clocked in, changed into his server uniform, black slacks, white button-down, black tie, and checked the reservation list. Walker! The floor manager, a perpetually stressed woman named Claire, appeared beside him clutching a tablet. You're taking the private dining room. VIP breakfast at 7:30. Ethan's stomach dropped. I've never worked private dining. You have now. Marcus called in sick, and you're the only one here who doesn't look hungover. She shoved the tablet at him. Guest name is Victoria Hale. She owns half the buildings in this city, so don't screw it up. Smile, be invisible, and for the love of everything holy, don't spill anything. Victoria Hale. Even Ethan, who didn't follow business news or society pages, recognized the name. Hale Industries, real estate empire. One of those faces that appeared on Forbes covers with headlines like The Woman Who Built Manhattan or Self-Made Billionaire at 40. Got it, he said, taking the tablet. Invisible. Don't spill. I mean it, Walker. This woman tips like a normal person's monthly rent if you don't piss her off. He nodded and headed toward the private dining room, a glass-walled space overlooking the street with a single table set for one. Fresh orchids in the center. Silverware polished to mirror brightness. A menu listing items that didn't include prices because anyone eating here didn't need to ask. Ethan checked his reflection in the hallway window, smoothed his tie, and took a breath. He'd served plenty of wealthy people before. The trick was staying pleasant and forgettable. They didn't want conversation. They wanted efficiency. At 7:28, Victoria Hale walked through the restaurant entrance. She wasn't what he expected. The photos online showed someone polished and untouchable. Severe business suits, hair pulled back, expression that could cut glass. The woman who entered the private dining room looked tired. Her suit was impeccable, charcoal gray with razor-sharp tailoring, but there were shadows under her eyes and tension in her jaw. She carried a leather briefcase in one hand and her phone in the other, already mid-conversation. I don't care what the zoning board says, James. Find the loophole. She didn't look at Ethan as she sat down, setting the phone on speaker while she opened the briefcase. We have 6 weeks until groundbreaking, and I'm not pushing the timeline because some bureaucrat wants a bigger bribe. Ethan poured water into her glass, silent and efficient. I'll handle it, the voice on the phone said. But Victoria, you need to... I need to what? Her tone was ice. Take a break? Delegate? I've heard it all, James. Call me when you have a solution. She ended the call and finally looked up at Ethan. Her eyes were sharp, pale blue, the kind that seemed to see through polite facades directly into whatever truth you were hiding. Coffee, she said. Black. And I'll have the smoked salmon with poached eggs. Right away, Ms. Hale. He turned toward the door just as it swung open. A young server, couldn't have been more than 20, stumbled through carrying a tray of water pitchers. She was new, Ethan realized, one of the hires from last week who was still learning the layout. She didn't see the step down into the private dining area. It happened in slow motion. Her foot caught the edge. The tray tilted. Water arced through the air in a crystalline wave, aimed directly at Victoria Hale's back. Ethan moved without thinking. He lunged forward, grabbing the girl's arm and yanking her sideways. The tray clattered to the floor, pitchers shattering across marble tile. Water splashed across Ethan's uniform and onto the edge of Victoria's suit jacket. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The young server looked like she might cry. Victoria Hale stood slowly, water dripping from her sleeve, and turned around. Her expression was unreadable. "I am so sorry," Ethan said immediately, stepping between Victoria and the girl. "That was completely my fault. I should have been watching the door." "Your fault?" Victoria's eyebrow arched. "You weren't carrying the tray." "I was blocking the path." "I apologize for the disruption, Ms. Hale. I'll get you a towel and fresh coffee immediately." He could feel the young server shaking beside him, could hear Claire's heels clicking rapidly across the restaurant floor toward them. This was the part where he'd get fired. He'd been fired from jobs for less. But maybe if he took full responsibility, the kid would keep her position. She looked like she needed it. Victoria studied him for a long moment, her gaze moving from his face to his soaked uniform to the terrified girl half hidden behind him. "What's your name?" she asked. "Ethan Walker." "How long have you worked here, Ethan Walker?" 6 months, ma'am." "And her?" Victoria nodded toward the young server. "This is her 2nd week." Another pause. Then Victoria pulled out her phone and took a photo of the mess on the floor. Ethan's heart sank. She was documenting it. Evidence for the complaint she'd file with management. "Ms. Hale, I'm so terribly sorry." Claire arrived, breathless, already pulling out her own phone to call maintenance. "It was an accident," Victoria said calmly, cutting her off. She looked at Ethan again, something unreadable in her expression. "These things happen. I'd still like my coffee and salmon, please, and someone should clean up this glass before anyone else gets hurt." "Of course, right away." Claire grabbed the young server's arm, pulling her toward the kitchen while hissing threats under her breath. Ethan stood frozen for a second, not quite believing what had just happened. Victoria Hale had sat back down and was typing on her phone as if nothing had occurred. No screaming, no demands to speak with the owner, no firing. "Your coffee," he managed, remembering why he was still standing there. "Yes? Still black." He hurried to the kitchen, changed into a spare shirt one of the line cooks lent him, and returned with fresh coffee and her breakfast. Victoria ate in silence, reading something on her tablet, occasionally making notes with a stylus. Ethan refilled her water once, brought extra lemon when she requested it, and otherwise stayed invisible. When she finished, she closed the tablet and looked directly at him. "You lied," she said. Ethan's throat tightened. "Ma'am? You weren't blocking any path. That girl tripped on her own. But you claimed responsibility anyway." Victoria's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted. Curiosity, maybe. Why? He could have deflected, could have insisted it was true, maintained the lie. But something about the way she asked, direct, genuinely wanting to know, made him answer honestly. "She's new. Probably needs this job. I figured I had a better chance of surviving the complaint than she did." "So you threw yourself in front of the metaphorical bus." "Something like that." Victoria picked up her coffee cup, took a slow sip, and set it down with deliberate precision. "That's either incredibly noble or incredibly stupid." "Probably both," Ethan admitted. For the first time since she'd walked into the restaurant, Victoria Hale smiled. It was small, barely a curve at the corner of her mouth, but it was real. "I'll be back next Thursday," she said, standing and collecting her briefcase. "Same time. I'd like you as my server again." "Of course, Ms. Hale." She pulled out her wallet, sleek black leather that probably cost more than Ethan's rent, and left $500 bills on the table. Ethan stared at the cash, certain he'd miscounted. "Ms. Hale, You think I made a mistake?" She was already walking toward the door. "I didn't. See you next week, Ethan Walker." She left. Ethan stood alone in the private dining room, looking at $500 in cash, and wondered what the hell had just happened. Over the next month, Victoria Hale became a regular. Every Thursday morning, 7:30 sharp, private dining room. Always alone. Always working through breakfast on her tablet or phone, always requesting Ethan. He learned her patterns. Black coffee first, refilled twice. She preferred the smoked salmon, but occasionally ordered the seasonal frittata. She didn't make small talk. She tipped exactly $500 every visit, no matter what she ordered. The other servers were jealous. Claire stopped giving Ethan the worst shifts. Even the kitchen staff treated him differently once word spread that he'd somehow become the favorite server of one of New York's wealthiest women. But Ethan remained cautious. He didn't understand why Victoria kept requesting him, and he didn't trust good fortune. In his experience, things that seemed too good were usually traps waiting to spring. On the fifth Thursday, Victoria arrived 10 minutes late, which was unusual. Her hair was slightly disheveled, and there was a tightness around her eyes that suggested a headache or worse. "Coffee," she said without preamble, collapsing into the chair. Ethan poured it immediately. "Long morning, Ms. Hale?" "Long year." She rubbed her temples. "Do you ever feel like you're running as fast as you can but still falling behind?" It was the first personal thing she'd ever said to him. Ethan paused, coffee pot still in hand, unsure if she actually wanted an answer. "Every day," he said quietly. Victoria looked up at him, really looked, as if seeing him for the first time. "You have a child, don't you?" He was surprised she knew. "A son, Noah. He's 5. "And you work here, plus other jobs?" "3 others, yeah, when I can get the shifts." The Father of the Year award must be exhausting. Ethan couldn't tell if she was mocking him or not. "It's what you do," he said carefully. "When someone depends on you." Victoria's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, it is." She returned her attention to her tablet, and Ethan brought her breakfast. But something had shifted. The wall between server and customer had developed a crack. The following Thursday, Victoria arrived with a proposition. "I'm hosting a private dinner tomorrow night," she said as Ethan poured her coffee. 10 guests, business associates. I need additional serving staff, and the regular catering company is short-handed. Are you available? Tomorrow night? Ethan mentally calculated his schedule. He was supposed to work a delivery shift, but if this paid anything close to what she tipped for breakfast, what time? 7 p.m. It'll run until around 11. I'll pay you $1,000 for the evening. Ethan nearly dropped the coffee pot. 1,000, Ms. Hale, that's non-negotiable, she said crisply. You'll be working. I expect professional service. If you're interested, here's the address. She slid a business card across the table. Employee entrance is on the west side of the building. Ask for Martin, my head of household staff. He'll brief you. Ethan picked up the card. The address was in Tribeca, the kind of neighborhood where apartments started at 10 million and went up from there. I'll be there, he said. Good. Victoria returned to her tablet, conversation apparently over. That night, Ethan told Mrs. Chen he had a special job and asked if she could watch Noah until midnight. She agreed immediately, refusing the extra money he tried to give her. He spent Friday afternoon at a thrift store, using part of his last paycheck to buy a better pair of dress shoes and a white shirt without frayed cuffs. At 6:45 p.m., he stood outside a glass and steel tower in Tribeca, staring up at the building that seemed to pierce the sky. The employee entrance led to a service elevator operated by a security guard who checked Ethan's ID against a list before letting him proceed. The elevator opened onto the penthouse floor, a private hallway with only one door. Ethan knocked. A man in his 60s answered, impeccably dressed in formal serving attire. Mr. Walker? That's me. Martin. Come in, please. We have 20 minutes before guests arrive. The penthouse was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River and the Manhattan skyline. Minimalist furniture that somehow looked both comfortable and worth a fortune. Art on the walls that Ethan suspected belonged in museums. And space. So much space that his entire apartment could have fit in the living room alone. Martin led him through a quick tour of the kitchen, the dining room where the table was already set for 10, the service protocols Victoria expected. 2 other servers were already there, both professionals who clearly did this regularly. Ethan felt out of his depth, but focused on Martin's instructions. Ms. Hale values discretion above all else, Martin said as they finished the briefing. You'll hear conversations tonight that should never be repeated. Understood? Understood. Good. Guests will begin arriving in 10 minutes. Take your position in the kitchen. The dinner was unlike anything Ethan had experienced. The guests were titans of industry, CEOs, investors, a senator, a federal judge. They spoke in shorthand about deals worth hundreds of millions, about policy decisions that would affect thousands of lives, about power plays and strategic moves that sounded more like chess than business. Victoria presided over it all with calm authority. She'd changed into a midnight blue dress that probably cost more than a car, her hair swept up, diamond earrings catching the light. She looked untouchable, a woman who commanded rooms and shaped cities with a phone call. But twice during the evening, when Ethan was refilling wine glasses or clearing plates, her eyes found his across the room. Just for a second, just long enough for him to see the exhaustion she hid from everyone else. The guests left around 11. Martin dismissed the other servers, but asked Ethan to stay and help with final cleanup. By midnight, the penthouse was restored to perfect order and Martin handed Ethan an envelope. "Ms. Hale asked me to give you this. Good work tonight." "Thank you." Ethan opened the envelope and found $1,500 bills. "Martin, this is more than Ms. Hale's instructions," Martin said firmly. "Good night, Mr. Walker." Ethan took the service elevator down, walked out into the February night, and stood on the sidewalk holding more cash than he'd seen in months. His hands were shaking. This wasn't normal. None of this was normal. Wealthy people didn't notice servers. They didn't request the same one repeatedly. They didn't pay triple for a few hours of work. Whatever was happening, Ethan didn't understand it, and that made him nervous. But Noah needed new shoes. The landlord was threatening eviction. The medical debt wasn't going away. Ethan pocketed the money and headed for the subway. He didn't see the photographer across the street, camera with a telephoto lens pointed at Victoria's penthouse windows, capturing images of the young man in serving clothes leaving the building just after midnight. 3 weeks passed. Victoria continued her Thursday breakfasts. She hired Ethan for 2 more private dinners. The money was extraordinary, enough that he paid his rent on time for the first time in a year, bought Noah new clothes, and even started a small savings account. But the attention was increasing. Other staff at Aurelius whispered about Ethan's sudden good fortune. Claire made comments about knowing the right people. The other servers treated him with a mixture of resentment and curiosity. Ethan tried to ignore it. He showed up on time, worked hard, and went home to his son. Whatever interest Victoria Hale had in him would eventually fade. Wealthy people moved on. This was temporary. Then came the Thursday morning that changed everything. Victoria arrived at Aurelius looking worse than he'd ever seen her. Her suit was wrinkled, actually wrinkled, which seemed impossible for someone whose appearance was usually flawless. Her hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail. She wasn't wearing makeup. "Coffee," she said, sitting down heavily. "And cancel my breakfast order. I'm not hungry." Ethan poured the coffee. "Are you all right, Ms. Hale?" "No." She laughed, but it was bitter. "Do you follow business news, Ethan?" "Not really." "Lucky you." Victoria pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. The screen showed a news article. Hale Industries faces hostile takeover attempt. Former partner seeks control of empire. Ethan scanned the article. Something about a corporate power struggle, a former business partner trying to acquire enough shares to force Victoria out of her own company. "I'm sorry," he said, unsure what else to offer. "Don't be. Marcus has been trying to destroy me since we broke up. He's just getting more creative about it." She took a long drink of coffee. 3 years together, and the moment I ended it, he dedicated his life to taking everything I built. He sounds like a real prize. Victoria actually smiled. That's one way to put it. She looked at him curiously. "You don't read about me, do you? You don't know anything about my life outside these Thursday mornings." "I try not to make assumptions," Ethan said carefully. "That's refreshing." She leaned back in her chair, studying him. "Everyone else I know wants something. They smile and nod and wait for the right moment to ask for favors or connections or money. But you," she shook her head, "you actually tried to refuse extra payment because it was too much." "No such thing as too much when someone earns it." Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and sighed. "I have to go. Emergency board meeting." She stood, leaving her usual $500 on the table. Then she paused. "Ethan, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "Are you happy?" The question caught him completely off guard. I don't know. I have Noah. That's enough." "But is it what you wanted? This life?" Ethan thought about teaching, about the career he'd loved and lost, about Sarah and the future they'd planned before cancer stole it. about the years of grinding poverty and constant fear. No, he admitted, but it's what I have. Victoria nodded slowly, as if he'd confirmed something she'd suspected. I'll see you next week. She left. Ethan cleared the table and went back to work, unaware that across the street, the same photographer from before was capturing images through the restaurant's windows. Images of Victoria Hale smiling at a server, looking more relaxed than she had in months. By evening, those photos would be uploaded to a cloud server. By morning, they'd be sold to tabloids. And by the end of the week, Ethan Walker's life would explode in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. But in that moment, clearing coffee cups and thinking about Victoria Hale's question, he simply went back to work, counting the hours until he could go home to his son and pretend for a little while longer that the world was still predictable and safe. The scandal broke on a Tuesday morning while Ethan was making Noah breakfast. His phone started buzzing at 6:15 a.m., which was unusual. Text messages from numbers he didn't recognize, missed calls, notifications from social media apps he barely used. He ignored them at first, focused on getting scrambled eggs onto Noah's plate and making sure the boy had clean clothes for school. "Daddy, your phone is loud," Noah said through a mouthful of toast. "I know, buddy. Eat your breakfast." Ethan picked up the phone, intending to silence it, and saw 17 missed calls. 23 text messages. His Instagram had exploded with follow requests and comments. Something cold settled in his stomach. He opened the first text message. It was from someone he'd worked with at his delivery job. "Dude, is this really you?" With a link attached. Ethan clicked it. The webpage loaded slowly on his cracked screen, and then he was staring at his own face. A photo of him leaving Victoria's building after one of the private dinners, the headline above it reading, "Mystery Man leaving billionaire Victoria Hale's penthouse." After midnight, secret romance or something more sinister? His hands went numb. He scrolled down. There were more photos. Him pouring coffee at Aurelius. Victoria smiling at him across the table. Another shot of them through the restaurant window, her leaning forward as if they were sharing secrets. The article was full of speculation and innuendo, questioning who he was, suggesting everything from a secret affair to some kind of exploitation scheme. Sources close to Hale Industries confirmed that the unidentified man has been seen regularly at Ms. Hale's private residence and has been receiving substantial financial compensation for reasons that remain unclear, the article stated. The nature of their relationship has raised eyebrows among Manhattan's elite, with some suggesting that the billionaire CEO may be the victim of manipulation by someone seeking to access her considerable fortune. Ethan's vision blurred. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. His phone rang. Claire from Aurelius. "Hello?" His voice came out rough. "Ethan, where are you right now?" Claire sounded frantic. "Home. Why?" "Don't come in today. Actually, don't come in at all. You're suspended pending investigation." "Investigation? Claire, what?" "There are reporters outside the restaurant asking questions about you and Victoria Hale. The owner is losing his mind. Did you really not think this would become a problem?" "I was working," Ethan said, anger cutting through the shock. "I was serving food at private dinners she hired me for, that's it." "Well, it doesn't look like that's it. I have to go. Don't contact anyone from the restaurant until you hear from HR." She hung up. Ethan stood frozen in his tiny kitchen, the smell of burned eggs filling the air, while his son ate breakfast and hummed a song from school. The phone rang again. Unknown number. He answered without thinking. "Is this Ethan Walker?" A woman's voice, professional and sharp. "Who's asking?" "Rebecca Chen from the Metro Daily. I'm doing a story on your relationship with Victoria Hale and was hoping to get your side of things. Can you confirm that you've been regularly visiting her penthouse? What is the nature of your relationship? Have you received money or gifts from Ms. Hale?" Ethan hung up. The phone immediately rang again. Different number. He declined the call. Another call came through, then another. "Daddy, who keeps calling you?" Noah was watching him with wide eyes, sensing something wrong. "Nobody, buddy. Finish your breakfast, okay? We need to get you to school." But when Ethan walked Noah to the bus stop 20 minutes later, there were two people with cameras waiting outside his building. They started snapping photos the moment he stepped onto the sidewalk. "Mr. Walker, Can you comment on your relationship with Victoria Hale? How long have you been seeing her? Is it true she's paying you? Ethan grabbed Noah's hand and walked faster, his heart pounding. Noah was looking around with confusion and fear, not understanding why strangers were shouting at his father. Don't look at them, Ethan said quietly. Just keep walking. They made it to the bus stop. Ethan knelt down to Noah's level, blocking the photographers with his body. Listen to me, Noah. Some people are going to be asking weird questions for a little while. If anyone approaches you at school, you don't talk to them. You go find your teacher immediately. Understand? Why are they taking pictures of us? Because they're confused about something, and they think I can help them. But it's nothing bad, okay? Everything's fine. It was a lie. Nothing was fine. But Noah was 5 years old and didn't need to carry his father's panic. The bus arrived. Ethan hugged his son tight, kissed his forehead, and watched him climb aboard. As the bus pulled away, he turned to face the photographers who had followed him down the block. I have nothing to say, he told them. Please leave me alone. Just a few questions, Mr. Walker. No. He walked back to his building, ignoring the shouted questions, and took the stairs 2 at a time up to his apartment. Inside, he locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. He turned it off completely, then sat on the edge of his bed and tried to think. This was insane. He'd served food at some dinners. He'd been polite and professional. Victoria had tipped generously, but that wasn't illegal. There was no relationship beyond employer and employee. Why was this a story? But even as he thought it, he knew why. Because Victoria Hale was one of the most powerful women in New York, and he was nobody. Because the optics looked bad even though nothing bad had happened. Because the internet loved a scandal, especially one that suggested a wealthy woman might be getting exploited by a poor man, or vice versa. Ethan pulled out his laptop and searched his own name. The results made him feel sick. Dozens of articles, blog posts, social media threads. People he'd never met were discussing his life, his choices, his motives. Some were defending him, most weren't. The comment sections were vicious. Obviously a gold digger. She's lonely, and he's taking advantage. What kind of man uses a billionaire for money? This is what happens when people get desperate. His past was being excavated and distorted. Someone had found his teaching certification and was speculating about why he'd left the profession. His late wife's obituary had been discovered and twisted into a sob story he was supposedly using to manipulate Victoria. There were photos of Noah. Someone had gotten pictures of his son, with captions questioning what kind of father would put his child in this situation. Ethan closed the laptop before he put his fist through the screen. He sat in silence for a long time, trying to control his breathing, trying to figure out what to do. He needed to talk to Victoria. She had to know what was happening. Maybe her lawyers could fix this, issue a statement, make it clear that their relationship was purely professional, but he didn't have her personal number. All their interactions had been through the restaurant or arranged by Martin. He couldn't exactly call Hale Industries and ask to be transferred to the CEO. His phone rang again, even though he'd turned it off. He realized it was the landline, the ancient corded phone that came with the apartment and that he'd never disconnected because it was cheaper than a second cell line. He picked up. Hello? Ethan, it's Martin, from Ms. Hale's residence. Relief flooded through him. Martin, thank God. Is Ms. Hale aware of... She's aware. She's currently in meetings with her legal team and public relations advisors. She asked me to contact you directly. Are you safe? Are there reporters at your location? There were 2 outside earlier. I don't know if they're still there. Stay inside. Don't speak to anyone from the media. Ms. Hale's lawyers will be issuing a statement this afternoon clarifying the nature of your employment relationship. In the meantime, she wanted me to give you her private number in case you need to reach her directly. Martin recited the number. Ethan wrote it down on the back of an envelope, his hand shaking. Tell her I'm sorry, Ethan said. I don't know how this happened, but I never meant for any of this to affect her. She knows that. She also wanted me to tell you that she's handling it. Don't worry. Don't worry. As if that were possible when his face was all over the internet and reporters were stalking his apartment building. After Martin hung up, Ethan sat with Victoria's number in his hand for 15 minutes before he found the courage to call it. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. Ethan. Her voice was tense but controlled. Are you all right? I'm fine. Victoria, I don't understand what's happening. I didn't talk to any reporters. I know you didn't. This is Marcus. Your ex? He hired a private investigator to follow me months ago. The photographer, the leaked photos, the anonymous sources feeding information to tabloids. It's all him. He's trying to create a scandal that will force my board to question my judgment and leadership. Ethan felt anger surge through him. So I'm just collateral damage in his revenge plot? Yes. Victoria's honesty was almost startling. And I'm sorry. I should have anticipated this. I should have been more careful. Careful about what? Hiring someone to serve dinner? About being seen with someone who doesn't fit the narrative people expect. About letting myself have one small part of my life that felt normal. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. I liked our Thursday mornings, Ethan. You didn't treat me like a walking checkbook or a networking opportunity. You were just real. That's rare in my world. Something in his chest tightened. I was just doing my job. No, you weren't. You were being kind. There's a difference. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Ethan could hear voices in the background on her end, other people waiting for her attention, decisions that needed making. My lawyers are preparing a statement, Victoria said. It will make clear that you were hired as private event staff on several occasions and that there is no romantic or inappropriate relationship between us. That should calm things down. Will it? Honestly, I don't know. The internet has already decided what it wants to believe. She sighed. I'm going to have my security team keep an eye on your building. If the press presence gets worse, let me know immediately. Victoria, you don't have to. Yes, I do. This is my fault. You're dealing with consequences that should be mine alone. Another pause. I have to go. My PR team is waiting. But Ethan, if this gets too much, if you need anything, call me directly, day or night. Okay? And for what it's worth, I'm sorry you're going through this. You don't deserve it. She hung up before he could respond. Ethan sat in his quiet apartment, holding the phone, and wondered how his life had spiraled so completely out of control in the span of a single morning. The statement from Victoria's lawyers was released at 2 p.m. Ethan read it on his laptop, hope flickering in his chest. Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Industries, wishes to clarify recent media speculation regarding her professional relationship with Ethan Walker. Mr. Walker was hired on several occasions to provide catering support at private business functions hosted by Ms. Hale. All compensation was appropriate for the services rendered. There is no personal relationship between Ms. Hale and Mr. Walker beyond a standard employer-employee arrangement. Ms. Hale values her privacy and asks that the media respect the privacy of all parties involved. It was clear, direct, and completely insufficient. Within an hour, the internet had torn it apart. People questioned why a billionaire needed to hire one specific server repeatedly. Others pointed out that the photos showed them looking too comfortable with each other. Conspiracy theories multiplied. Some claimed Victoria was lying to protect her reputation. Others suggested Ethan had forced her to issue the statement. A few thought the whole thing was a publicity stunt. By evening, the story had grown bigger. News outlets were running segments about it. Talk shows were making jokes. Someone created a hashtag that was trending nationwide. Ethan's other jobs called. The delivery company suspended him. The warehouse told him not to come in until the media attention died down. Within 24 hours, he'd lost every source of income except the money Victoria had already paid him. When he picked Noah up from school, a reporter tried to approach them in the parking lot. Ethan grabbed his son and practically ran to Mrs. Chen's apartment, where he'd arranged for Noah to stay until the crowd outside their building dispersed. "Daddy, why are those people following us?" Noah asked, tears in his eyes. "They're just confused, buddy. It'll stop soon." But it didn't stop. It got worse. On Wednesday, someone leaked Ethan's financial records, his debt, his eviction notices from 2 years ago, his late wife's medical bills. The narrative shifted. Now he wasn't just a gold digger. He was a desperate man who'd seen an opportunity and seized it. The story became about class, about what people would do when backed into a corner, about the gap between the rich and everyone else. Ethan stopped reading the articles. He stopped checking his phone. He stayed inside and waited for it to blow over. Thursday came, his usual morning to see Victoria at Aurelius. He couldn't go, of course. He was suspended, and even if he wasn't, the restaurant would be mobbed with photographers. His phone rang at 7:30 a.m. exactly. Victoria. "I'm sorry," she said without preamble. "I know this was supposed to be our morning." "It's fine." "It's not fine. None of this is fine." She sounded exhausted. "Ethan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." "Okay." "Marcus is going to approach you. Maybe not today, maybe not this week, but soon. He's going to offer you money to say that I coerced you, or that there was something inappropriate in our relationship, or some other lie designed to damage my reputation. When he does, I need you to say no." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "You think I'd betray you for money? I think you're in an impossible situation because of me. I think you have a son who depends on you and bills that are crushing you. I think Marcus will offer enough money to change your life, and I wouldn't blame you for considering it. I'm not going to lie about you, Victoria. Even if it means financial security for Noah?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Because she was right. He would do almost anything for his son. Almost. "Even then," Ethan said quietly, "I don't lie. Especially not about people who've only ever been decent to me." He heard her exhale, a sound that might have been relief or something else he couldn't identify. "Thank you," she said softly. They talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, how Noah was handling things, whether the reporters were still outside Ethan's building, the weather. It felt strange, talking to a billionaire CEO about mundane details like they were friends instead of two people caught in a media firestorm. When they hung up, Ethan felt more settled. Whatever was happening, at least he and Victoria understood each other. Marcus Renton made contact 3 days later. Ethan was taking out the trash, moving quickly to avoid the single photographer who'd maintained a vigil outside his building. A black town car pulled up to the curb, and a man in an expensive suit stepped out. "Ethan Walker?" Ethan recognized him from internet searches he'd done after Victoria mentioned his name. Marcus Renton, 45, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, former CFO of Hale Industries before Victoria pushed him out for reasons that were still disputed in business circles. "I have nothing to say to you," Ethan said, turning back toward his building. "I'm not a reporter. I'm someone who wants to help you." "I don't need help from you." "Don't you?" Marcus fell into step beside him, his tone conversational. "You've lost your jobs. Your name is mud on the internet. You're drowning in debt, and you have a young son who's going to suffer because his father was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I can fix all of that." Ethan stopped walking. "How?" Marcus smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes, the kind that made Ethan think of predators sizing up prey. "Tell the truth about Victoria, about how she used her wealth and position to take advantage of you, how she made you uncomfortable but you needed the money so you couldn't say no, how she manipulated a struggling single father for her own gratification." Disgust rolled through Ethan's stomach. "That's not what happened." "Does it matter? The public is already halfway to believing it. You give one interview, just one, confirming their suspicions, and I'll make sure you never have to worry about money again." $1 million, Ethan. Cash. Enough to pay off your debt, get a bigger apartment, set up a college fund for your son. All you have to do is tell people what they already want to hear. $1 million. The number echoed in Ethan's head. He thought about Noah's shoes with holes in them, about the medical bills that would follow him for years, about the teaching career he'd loved and lost. He thought about what security would feel like, what it would mean to stop running on the edge of survival every single day. Then he thought about Victoria's face across a breakfast table, asking if he was happy. About her trusting him with her private number. About the way she'd defended him when the water spilled, when she could have just let him get fired. "No," Ethan said. Marcus's smile didn't waver. "You should think about it. Talk to your son. Ask yourself if your pride is worth his future." I said no. Don't contact me again. Ethan walked into his building and didn't look back. His hands were shaking, but his conscience was clear. He called Victoria that night and told her what had happened. "He offered you $1 million?" She sounded stunned. "Yeah." "And you turned him down?" "Of course I did. Victoria, I'm not going to help him destroy you just because my life is hard right now. That's not who I am." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was thick with something Ethan couldn't quite identify. "Thank you," she said. I mean that. Thank you. You don't have to thank me for basic decency. Yes, I do. Because it's rarer than you think. After they hung up, Ethan sat in the dark and wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. $1 million could have changed everything. But it would have cost him the one thing he'd managed to hold on to through years of poverty and loss, his integrity. He hoped it would be enough. He hoped Noah would understand someday. The media storm continued for another week. More articles, more speculation, more harassment. Someone published Ethan's home address online, and he had to call the police when strangers started showing up at his door. Noah's school called to report that a woman claiming to be a family friend had tried to check him out early, but the teachers had stopped her because she wasn't on the authorized list. Ethan was terrified. He barely slept. He kept Noah home from school for 3 days because he didn't trust that his son would be safe. Victoria's security team increased their presence. They posted guards outside Ethan's building, screened visitors, and made sure Noah got to and from Mrs. Chen's apartment safely. Victoria called every day, sometimes just to check in, sometimes to update him on her legal battles with Marcus. He's filing motions to access company records, claiming I've been misusing corporate funds, she told Ethan one night. He's trying to tie you to some kind of embezzlement scheme. That's insane. It's strategic. If he can make the board believe I've been inappropriate with company resources, they might vote to remove me as CEO. This was never really about you, Ethan. You're just the weapon he's using against me. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. You didn't do anything wrong. But it didn't feel that way. It felt like Ethan's mere existence had become a liability, a crack that Marcus was exploiting to tear down everything Victoria had built. 2 weeks after the scandal broke, Aurelius officially terminated Ethan's employment. The email was brief and impersonal, citing conduct unbecoming of restaurant standards and bringing unwanted attention to the establishment. There was no severance, no acknowledgement of the 6 months he'd worked there without a single complaint. Ethan read the email twice, then deleted it. He was down to zero income now, living off the money Victoria had paid him and watching it disappear toward rent and food and keeping Noah safe. He started looking for new jobs, but every application was rejected within hours. His name was too recognizable now. No one wanted the controversy. On a Saturday morning 3 weeks into the nightmare, Ethan's landlord knocked on his door. "I need you out by the end of the month," the man said without preamble. "What? Why?" "You're violating the lease, the press attention, the security guards, the disruption to other tenants. It's not what I signed up for. I'm paid through next month. You can't just evict me. Read your lease. There's a clause about conduct that disturbs the peaceful enjoyment of the building. You're in violation. I want you out, or I'm starting formal eviction proceedings." The door closed. Ethan stood in his apartment, the place he'd fought so hard to keep, the small space that had been home to him and Noah for 2 years, and felt the last bit of solid ground beneath him crumble. He called Victoria. It was 9 a.m. on a Saturday, but she answered on the second ring. "Ethan, what's wrong?" "I'm being evicted. My landlord says I'm violating the lease because of all the media attention." "That's illegal. You can fight it." "With what money? With what time?" His voice cracked. "Victoria, I can't do this anymore. I have no job, no prospects, and in 3 weeks I'm going to be homeless with a 5-year-old. Maybe I should have taken Marcus's money. Maybe I should have—" "Don't." Her voice was sharp, cutting through his spiral. "Don't second-guess yourself. You did the right thing, and I'm not going to let you lose everything because of it. You can't fix this. Watch me." She hung up. Ethan sat on his bed, head in his hands, and tried to remember the last time he'd felt like he had any control over his own life. 2 hours later, Martin called. "Mr. Walker, I have a proposal from Ms. Hale that I'd like to discuss with you. Do you have a few minutes?" Ethan's first instinct was to say no, that he'd already taken too much from Victoria and didn't want to owe her anything else. But he was desperate, and desperation made people listen to proposals they'd otherwise refuse. "I'm listening," he said. "Ms. Hale owns several properties throughout the city. One of them is a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, currently vacant. She would like to offer it to you and your son at no cost until this situation resolves itself." "Martin, I can't accept that." "She anticipated you would say that. She asked me to remind you that this isn't charity. It's her taking responsibility for the situation she inadvertently created. She also pointed out that you have a son to think about, and pride is less important than his stability. Ethan closed his eyes. He hated that she was right. He hated that he was in a position where accepting help from a billionaire was the only option that didn't end with Noah sleeping in a shelter. "Okay," he said quietly. "Thank you. Tell her thank you. She also wanted me to inform you that her legal team has put together evidence proving that Marcus hired the private investigator and orchestrated this entire media campaign. They're preparing to file a lawsuit against him for harassment and defamation. The evidence includes communication records, payment receipts, and testimony from the photographer he hired. It should be enough to stop him and clear your name." For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt something like hope. "When?" he asked. "They're filing on Monday. By Tuesday, the narrative should start to shift. But Mr. Walker, I should warn you, this will get worse before it gets better. Marcus will retaliate, and you'll be caught in the crossfire." "I'm already caught in the crossfire." "True enough. I'll send you the address and keys for the apartment. You can move in whenever you're ready." Ethan moved out of his old apartment the following weekend with Mrs. Chen's help and the assistance of 2 off-duty security guards Victoria had sent. The new place was in a quiet Brooklyn neighborhood with actual space and working heat and windows that didn't leak cold air. Noah loved it immediately, running from room to room and claiming the smaller bedroom as his own. "This is so much bigger, Daddy!" he shouted, jumping on the bed that had been left furnished. Ethan stood in the living room and felt the weight of obligation settle on his shoulders. He owed Victoria now. Maybe not officially, maybe not in any way she'd ever collect on, but the debt was there nonetheless. He called her that night after Noah was asleep. "Thank you for the apartment," he said. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You already did. You could have sold me out to Marcus and set yourself up for life. Instead, you protected me even when it cost you everything. That's not something I'll forget." "I just did what anyone would do." "No, Ethan, you did what you would do. Most people would have taken the money." They talked until midnight about nothing in particular. Noah's excitement about his new room, a documentary Victoria had watched, the small moments of normalcy they were both craving. It felt easy, natural, like they'd known each other for years instead of months. When they finally said goodnight, Ethan lay in bed in his new apartment and realized that somewhere in the chaos and fear and constant pressure, something had changed. Victoria wasn't just the wealthy woman who'd tipped well or the CEO caught in a scandal. She was someone he cared about, someone who'd shown him more loyalty in a crisis than most people would show in a lifetime. He didn't know what that meant or where it could possibly go, but for the first time since the scandal broke, he felt like maybe they'd both survive this intact. On Monday morning, Victoria's lawyers filed their lawsuit against Marcus Renton. The evidence was damning: emails discussing the surveillance plan, payment records to the photographer, messages coordinating the leak of Ethan's financial information. By Monday afternoon, the story had shifted. The headlines now focused on Marcus's revenge scheme and the calculated destruction of 2 innocent people's reputations. Ethan watched the news coverage with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. His name was being cleared, but the damage was already done. The internet never fully forgets, and his face would always be associated with scandal in the minds of anyone who'd followed the story. But Noah was safe. They had a home, and Victoria had stood by him when she could have just as easily thrown him to the wolves to protect herself. That had to be enough. The apologies started arriving within 48 hours of the lawsuit filing. First came the restaurant industry blog that had published a scathing piece about Ethan being a social climber using tragic circumstances for financial gain. Their retraction was buried on page 7 of their website, barely 2 paragraphs acknowledging they'd relied on unverified sources. The Metro Daily, which had run 3 separate articles questioning his motives, issued a formal apology and removed the stories from their site entirely. One by one, the outlets that had built careers on his destruction were quietly backing away, editing headlines, deleting tweets, pretending they'd never participated in the feeding frenzy. But the damage lingered like smoke after a fire. Ethan could still find his name attached to conspiracy theories on obscure forums. Old articles remained cached in search results. The comment section stayed active with people who either hadn't seen the updates or simply didn't care about the truth. He tried not to look. Most days he succeeded. The new apartment in Brooklyn became a sanctuary. Noah adjusted quickly, making friends with kids in the building and starting at a new school where nobody recognized his father's face from tabloid photos. Ethan spent his days job hunting and his evenings reading to his son, trying to rebuild some semblance of normal life from the wreckage. Victoria called every few days, usually in the evenings after Noah was asleep. Their conversations had shifted from crisis management to something more personal. She told him about board meetings that left her drained, about her childhood in Philadelphia before her father's real estate company collapsed, and taught her that wealth could vanish as quickly as it appeared. He told her about teaching, about the students whose faces he still remembered, about Sarah and the year they spent fighting cancer together. "Do you miss it?" Victoria asked one night. Teaching? Ethan was sitting on the small balcony off the living room, watching lights flicker across Brooklyn's skyline. "Every day. I loved those kids. I loved watching them figure out that they were smarter than they thought, that learning could be exciting instead of just another thing adults forced them to do." "Why don't you go back?" "Because I can't afford to. Teacher salary with my debt load? We'd be back where we started in 6 months." He paused, surprised by his own honesty. "And because I'm not sure I trust good things anymore. I had something I loved, and it got taken away. Part of me thinks if I reach for it again, I'll just lose it twice." That's fear talking, not logic. Maybe, but fear pays attention to patterns. Victoria was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "I understand that more than you know. After Marcus, I told myself I'd never let anyone close again. Relationships were just vulnerabilities waiting to be exploited. Easier to stay alone and focused on work than risk someone using my feelings against me." "Sounds lonely." "It was. It is." She exhaled slowly, but then some reckless server threw himself between me and a water pitcher, and I started wondering if maybe I'd been wrong about people. Ethan's chest tightened. "Victoria, I'm not asking for anything," she said quickly. "I'm just saying that fear might be protecting you from getting hurt again, but it's also keeping you from having the life you actually want. And I think you deserve better than that." After they hung up, Ethan sat on the balcony for another hour, thinking about choices and consequences and the strange path that had led a struggling single father and a billionaire CEO to become something that looked increasingly like friends. The lawsuit against Marcus moved forward with mechanical efficiency. Victoria's legal team had built an airtight case, and Marcus's lawyers were scrambling to find any angle for defense. Discovery revealed even more damaging evidence. Texts between Marcus and a business journalist he'd been feeding stories to, emails outlining his plan to use Ethan as a weapon to destabilize Victoria's position at Hale Industries, payment records showing he'd spent over $200,000 orchestrating the scandal. But Marcus wasn't going down quietly. His countermove came on a Wednesday afternoon, delivered through a press conference that every major news outlet covered live. Ethan was at a job interview, his first real prospect in weeks, a position at a charter school in Queens that was willing to overlook his recent notoriety, when his phone started exploding with notifications. He silenced it and tried to focus on the principal asking about his teaching philosophy, but the buzzing was relentless. The interview ended badly. He could see it in the principal's eyes, the way she'd gone from interested to cautious the moment she'd glanced at her own phone. By the time Ethan left the building, Marcus's press conference was the top trending topic in the country. He watched it on his phone while sitting in his car, dread building with every passing second. Marcus stood behind a podium flanked by his lawyers, looking appropriately wounded and sincere. "I want to address the recent allegations made against me by Victoria Hale and her legal team," he began. "The truth is, I've been trying to protect someone who couldn't protect himself. When I learned that Ms. Hale was engaging in what appeared to be an inappropriate relationship with a man in desperate financial circumstances, I felt obligated to investigate. What I discovered disturbed me deeply." Ethan's hands clenched around his phone. "Ethan Walker is a good man, caught in an impossible situation," Marcus continued. "A widower raising a young son alone, drowning in medical debt, struggling to keep a roof over their heads. When someone like Victoria Hale, a woman with unlimited resources and power, takes an interest in someone that vulnerable, it creates a dangerous imbalance. I'm not saying Ms. Hale set out to exploit Mr. Walker. I'm saying that the power differential made genuine consent impossible." The performance was masterful. Marcus positioned himself as a concerned citizen protecting the vulnerable, while simultaneously painting Victoria as a predator and Ethan as a victim too weak to recognize his own exploitation. The fact that none of it was true didn't matter. It was a narrative that fit perfectly into existing conversations about power, consent, and the responsibilities of the wealthy. I stand by my actions, Marcus concluded. If attempting to protect someone makes me guilty of harassment, then I'll wear that label proudly. All I ever wanted was to ensure that Ethan Walker and his son were safe from a situation that had already cost them so much. The press conference ended. Within minutes, the internet was ablaze with renewed speculation. Support split along predictable lines. Those who believed Marcus was a hero standing up to an abusive billionaire, and those who saw through the manipulation. But the damage was done. The narrative had shifted again, and this time Ethan was being framed as too damaged and desperate to know what was good for him. His phone rang. Victoria. "Don't watch it," she said immediately. "Too late. He's lying. You know he's lying." "I know, but half the country doesn't." Ethan leaned his head against the steering wheel. "Victoria, he made me sound like a helpless victim who can't think for himself. Like I'm some broken thing you're taking advantage of. Because that's the only angle he has left. If he can't prove corruption, he'll try to prove I'm morally unfit to lead my own company. It's all about controlling the board's perception." Her voice was tight with controlled fury. "My lawyers are preparing a response. We'll release the full documentation tomorrow. Every contract, every payment record, every communication that proves this was a straightforward employment relationship." "And what about what it's become?" The question escaped before Ethan could stop it. Silence stretched between them. "What do you mean?" Victoria asked carefully. "I mean the employment relationship ended the day Aurelius fired me, but we still talk every night. You got me this apartment. You call to check if Noah's okay. That's not employer and employee anymore, Victoria. That's something else, and Marcus knows it, even if we haven't said it out loud." More silence. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat in the quiet. "You're right," Victoria said finally. "It is something else. And I don't know what to call it or how to define it, but I know I'm not going to let Marcus Renton tell me I'm not allowed to care about someone just because they don't fit the profile of people I'm supposed to associate with." "Even if caring about me destroys your company?" "Even then, though I'm hoping it won't come to that." They stayed on the phone for another 20 minutes, not talking about Marcus or lawsuits or public perception, just existing in the same space even though they were separated by miles of city. When they finally hung up, Ethan sat in his car and wondered when exactly he'd fallen for her and whether she'd done the same. The next morning, Victoria's legal team released their counter-documentation, contracts showing standard rates for private event catering, payment records proving every dollar Ethan received was justified by work performed, testimony from Martin and other staff confirming Ethan's professionalism and the purely business nature of their initial relationship. It was comprehensive, detailed, and completely insufficient to combat the emotional narrative Marcus had constructed, because facts didn't matter when feelings were involved. People had already decided what they wanted to believe, and no amount of evidence would change minds that were made up. The Hale Industries Board called an emergency meeting for the following Monday. Victoria was required to attend and defend herself against allegations of conduct unbecoming of a CEO. The meeting would determine whether she retained control of the company she'd built from the ground up, or whether Marcus's campaign would succeed in tearing everything away from her. She called Ethan on Sunday night, the evening before the meeting. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Honestly, terrified. I faced hostile takeovers, market crashes, recessions that destroyed stronger companies than mine. But this is different. This isn't about business strategy or market conditions. This is about whether 12 people believe I'm morally fit to lead, based on a personal relationship that shouldn't be any of their business. Do you think they'll vote against you?" I think Marcus has spent months cultivating relationships with board members who were already skeptical of my leadership style. I think he's very good at making people doubt themselves. And I think tomorrow I'll find out whether a decade of success is enough to outweigh 3 weeks of scandal. Ethan wished he could be there with her. Wished he could stand beside her and tell the board that Victoria Hale was the most principled person he'd ever met, that she'd protected him when it would have been easier to cut him loose, that everything Marcus claimed was a calculated lie designed to steal what he couldn't earn legitimately. But his presence would only make things worse. He was the evidence of her supposed moral failure, the weakness Marcus was exploiting. The best thing Ethan could do for Victoria was stay away and let her fight this battle without the additional burden of defending her relationship with him. "You're going to be okay," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "You're brilliant and strong, and you've weathered worse than this. Have I? Victoria's laugh was hollow. I'm not sure I have. You have. You survived Marcus the first time. You built an empire from nothing. You've handled every crisis with grace and intelligence. Tomorrow's just another challenge. Ethan? Yeah? Thank you for everything. For being honest when lying would have been profitable. For not hating me even though knowing me has cost you everything. For being exactly who you are instead of who people expect you to be. Same to you, Ethan said quietly. They talked until after midnight, neither wanting to hang up, both knowing that tomorrow would determine whether they'd have any kind of future together or whether Marcus would finally succeed in tearing their lives apart. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, with rain turning Brooklyn's streets into rivers of dirty water. Ethan got Noah to school, then came back to the apartment and tried to work on job applications. He couldn't focus. Every few minutes he checked his phone, waiting for news that didn't come. The board meeting started at 9 a.m. and was scheduled to run until noon. Ethan imagined Victoria sitting in a conference room surrounded by men and women who held her fate in their hands, defending herself against accusations that shouldn't exist. He imagined Marcus there too, watching with satisfaction as his revenge plot reached its climax. At 11:47 a.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Mr. Walker, this is Jennifer Park from the New York Times. I'm writing a story about the board meeting happening right now at Hale Industries. Do you have any comment on Victoria Hale's potential removal as CEO? How did you get this number? Public records. Mr. Walker, sources inside the boardroom are saying the vote is leaning against Ms. Hale. As the person at the center of this controversy, do you feel any responsibility for what's happening to her career? Ethan hung up. The phone rang again immediately. A different number. He declined it. Another call. He turned the phone off and sat in the quiet apartment, guilt eating at him like acid. This was his fault. Not because he'd done anything wrong, but because his existence had given Marcus the ammunition he needed. If Ethan had never spilled that water, never caught Victoria's attention, never been anything more than another forgettable server in another forgettable restaurant, she wouldn't be fighting for her company right now. The afternoon dragged on. Ethan picked Noah up from school, made dinner, helped with homework, went through all the motions of normal parenting while his mind stayed locked on a boardroom across the city where Victoria's future was being decided. At 7:15 p.m., someone knocked on his door. Ethan checked the peephole, half expecting reporters. Instead, he saw Victoria standing in the hallway, still in her business suit, her hair falling loose from whatever style she'd worn to the meeting. She looked exhausted, and something else, vulnerable in a way he'd never seen. He opened the door. Victoria, what are you... She stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't tentative or questioning. It was the kiss of someone who'd spent months fighting feelings and had finally stopped running from them. Ethan froze for half a second in shock, then kissed her back, one hand coming up to cup her face while the other found her waist and pulled her closer. They broke apart after a long moment, both breathing hard. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I quit, she said. What? The board was going to vote against me. I could see it in their faces, could hear it in their questions. Marcus had won, so before they could force me out, I resigned as CEO of Hale Industries effective immediately. Ethan stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. You walked away from your company? I walked away from a company that valued Marcus's lies more than a decade of my leadership. I walked away from people who were willing to destroy me because I dared to care about someone they deemed inappropriate. Victoria's voice strengthened. And I walked away because staying would have meant agreeing that what I feel for you is wrong or shameful or something I need to apologize for. I'm not going to do that. Victoria, you can't. You built that company. You can't just give it up because of me. I'm not giving it up because of you. I'm giving it up because they asked me to choose between my integrity and their approval, and I chose myself. She touched his face gently. I chose us. There is no us. We barely know each other outside of crisis management and late-night phone calls. Then let's fix that. Let me take you to dinner. Let me meet Noah properly instead of just asking about him. Let me see if what I think I feel is real or just adrenaline and proximity and shared trauma. Ethan wanted to say yes. Every part of him wanted to pull her inside and slam the door and pretend the world didn't exist. But the rational part of his brain, the part that had kept him and Noah alive through years of impossible choices, was screaming warnings. "You just lost your company," he said carefully. "You're emotional and angry, and you're making decisions based on that. Tomorrow you're going to wake up and realize you threw away everything you worked for, and you're going to resent me for it." "No, I won't." "You don't know that." "Ethan." Victoria's hands were still on his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "I know what Marcus took from me today, but I also know what I would have lost if I'd stayed and won that vote. I would have lost the ability to look at myself in the mirror. I would have had to stand in front of my company and agree that caring about you was a mistake, that our friendship, or whatever this is, was inappropriate and needed to end. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't." "Daddy, who's at the door?" Noah's voice came from the living room, followed by the sound of small feet running toward them. Victoria stepped back quickly, putting professional distance between them. Ethan turned to see his son standing in the hallway, clutching his stuffed bear and looking at the strange woman with curiosity instead of fear. "Noah, this is Ms. Hale. She's a friend of mine. Victoria, this is my son." Victoria knelt down to Noah's level, her entire demeanor shifting to something warm and approachable. "It's very nice to meet you, Noah. Your dad talks about you all the time." "He does?" "He told me you're the best reader in your kindergarten class." Noah beamed. "I can read chapter books now. Do you like reading?" "I love reading. What's your favorite book?" They talked about books in school and the stuffed bear Noah had named Captain, and Ethan watched Victoria engage with his son with genuine interest and patience. No condescension, no awkwardness, just a woman talking to a 5-year-old like his opinions mattered. After a few minutes, Ethan sent Noah back to finish his cartoon. Victoria stood up, brushing invisible dust from her skirt. "He's wonderful," she said quietly. "He's everything." "I know. That's why I'm going to leave now and give you time to think." Victoria pulled a card from her purse and handed it to him. "This is the name of a headhunter who specializes in education placement. She owes me a favor. Call her tomorrow and mention my name. She'll help you find a teaching position that actually pays enough to live on." Victoria, "And this," she continued, pulling out another card, "is my new personal email address. Not connected to Hale Industries. Just mine. If you decide you want to explore what this could be, dinner, friendship, whatever feels right, send me a message. If you decide I'm too complicated or it's not worth the risk, I'll understand. But either way, call the headhunter. You deserve to have the career you love, regardless of what happens between us." She was halfway to the elevator when Ethan called after her. "Victoria, wait." She turned. "Thank you," he said. "For everything. For fighting Marcus even when it cost you. For protecting me and Noah when you could have just paid us off and moved on. For being someone I can actually believe in." Victoria smiled, and it was real and sad and hopeful all at once. "Thank you for reminding me that not everyone wants something from me. That was a gift I didn't know I needed." The elevator arrived. She stepped inside and Ethan watched until the doors closed and she disappeared from view. He went back into the apartment where Noah was sprawled on the couch watching cartoons. His son looked up at him with innocent curiosity. "Is Mrs. Hale your girlfriend, Daddy?" "Nobody. She's just a friend." "But she was looking at you the way Mommy used to look at you in the pictures." Ethan's throat tightened. Noah barely remembered Sarah, but he'd studied the old photos enough to recognize love when he saw it. "It's complicated," Ethan said finally. "Because she's rich?" "Because a lot of people think we shouldn't be friends." Noah considered this with the serious expression he got when trying to understand adult problems. "Do you think you shouldn't be friends?" "I don't know what I think anymore." "I liked her," Noah said simply. "She asked about Captain and actually listened to my answer. Most grown-ups just pretend to care." After Noah went to bed, Ethan sat on the balcony with Victoria's cards in his hand and stared at Brooklyn's lights without really seeing them. He thought about choices and consequences, about fear and courage, about whether it was possible to build something real from the wreckage of a scandal. His phone had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. He scrolled through them, finding a mixture of reporters seeking comments about Victoria's resignation, former colleagues offering condolences, and people he barely knew suddenly interested in his story now that Victoria was vulnerable. One message was from Marcus Renton. "You cost her everything. Hope you're happy. Ethan deleted it without responding. Another message was from Martin. Miss Hale wanted me to inform you that all security arrangements will continue regardless of her employment status. Your and Noah's safety remain her priority. He stared at that message for a long time, trying to reconcile the woman who'd just kissed him with the CEO who'd resigned her position rather than denounce their relationship. Trying to figure out if Victoria's feelings were real or just the result of months of shared crisis creating a false sense of intimacy. The truth was, he didn't know. He didn't know if what he felt was genuine or just gratitude mixed with attraction and the natural human tendency to bond with people who protected you. He didn't know if they could survive in the real world without scandal and Marcus and constant external pressure forcing them together. But he knew he wanted to find out. At 11 p.m., Ethan opened his laptop and composed an email to Victoria's new address. I'd like to take you to dinner. Somewhere normal where neither of us has to be anyone other than who we are. Let me know when you're free. He hit send before he could second-guess himself, then sat back and waited for a response that came 3 minutes later. Thursday at 7? I know a place in Brooklyn where nobody will recognize either of us. It's a date, Ethan typed back. It's a start, Victoria corrected. Ethan smiled and closed the laptop. Outside, Brooklyn sparkled with life and possibility. Inside, Noah was dreaming safely in his new bedroom. And somewhere across the city, a woman who'd given up an empire was probably wondering if she'd made the right choice. Ethan thought about Marcus's accusation that he'd cost Victoria everything. But that wasn't quite right. Victoria had chosen to walk away rather than pretend that caring about someone was a liability instead of a strength. She'd chosen dignity over approval, honesty over politics, and the possibility of something real over the certainty of something hollow. Maybe that wasn't losing everything. Maybe it was finally winning something that actually mattered. The week passed in strange limbo. News of Victoria's resignation dominated headlines for 48 hours before the media moved on to fresher scandals. Ethan called the headhunter Victoria had recommended and had 3 interviews scheduled within a week. Noah's teacher sent home a note saying he was settling in beautifully at his new school. Life was trying to return to something approaching normal, even though nothing felt remotely normal. Thursday arrived. Ethan dropped Noah off at Mrs. Chen's apartment. She'd transferred buildings to be closer to them, refusing to accept that distance might end their friendship, and spent 20 minutes trying to decide what to wear before settling on jeans and a button-down shirt that Sarah had bought him years ago. He took the subway to the address Victoria had sent, a neighborhood in Brooklyn he didn't know well. The restaurant was small and unpretentious, the kind of place that served excellent food without needing to prove anything. Victoria was already there, sitting in a booth near the back, wearing jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent, but looked casual enough to pass for normal. She smiled when she saw him, and something in Ethan's chest unlocked. "Hi," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Hi yourself. You found it okay?" GPS is a beautiful thing. He looked around the restaurant, noting the complete lack of photographers or curious stares. "How did you find this place?" "I own the building. The owner's been here for 30 years and values his regulars' privacy above everything else. We're safe here." "Do you own half of Brooklyn?" "Only the good parts." Victoria's smile was teasing, the tension that usually lived in her shoulders noticeably absent. "How was your week?" They talked about mundane things, Noah's progress in school, Victoria's adjustment to not having a company to run, the interviews Ethan had completed and felt cautiously optimistic about. The conversation flowed easily, no crisis to navigate, no external pressure forcing them together. Just 2 people getting to know each other without the weight of scandal crushing down. Dinner arrived. They ate and talked and laughed, and somewhere between the appetizers and dessert, Ethan realized he was having the best evening he'd had in years. Not because of where they were or what they were eating, but because Victoria was looking at him like he mattered, like his stories about kindergarten chaos and Noah's latest obsessions were as important as any corporate merger or business deal. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said as they finished coffee. "Sure." "Do you regret it? Meeting me, I mean. Do you wish you'd never caught that water pitcher and stayed just another server I never noticed?" Ethan thought about it honestly. He thought about the jobs he'd lost, the scandal, the fear and harassment and constant pressure. He thought about Noah being photographed, about the eviction, about every terrible consequence that had followed from one moment of instinct. "No," he said finally, "I don't regret it. Everything that happened was hard, but it also brought me here, to this moment, to you. And I think I'm okay with that trade." Victoria's eyes were bright. "Even though I cost you your career and your privacy and almost got you homeless?" "You didn't cost me anything. Marcus did. And you fought for me every step of the way, even when it meant sacrificing everything you'd built. That's not something I take lightly. I meant what I said the other night about wanting to see if this is real." "So did I." They left the restaurant and walked through Brooklyn's streets without destination, just moving through the evening air and talking about nothing important. At some point, Victoria's hand found his, and Ethan laced their fingers together without thinking about it. "I should probably tell you," Victoria said, "that I'm terrible at relationships. I work too much. I don't know how to be vulnerable, and I have trust issues that could fill a psychology textbook. I should probably tell you that I come with a 5-year-old who needs bedtime stories and help with homework and someone who'll show up to school events. I have debt that'll take years to pay off, trauma from watching my wife die, and enough emotional baggage to fill a cargo ship. So we're both disasters." "Pretty much." Victoria stopped walking and turned to face him. "Want to be disasters together?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "I really do." She kissed him again, softer this time, like they had all the time in the world instead of stolen moments between crises. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "This is going to be complicated, you know. People will talk, they'll say I'm slumming, or, oh, sure, you're using me. They'll question every choice we make. Let them talk. I'm done living my life based on what other people think is appropriate." "Good. So am I." They walked back toward the subway station, hands still linked, and Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope that felt earned instead of desperate. Possibility that wasn't built on fantasy, but on the solid foundation of two people who'd seen each other at their worst and chosen to stay anyway. The morning after their first real date, Ethan woke to find his name trending again on social media. He stared at his phone screen with the weary resignation of someone who'd learned that privacy was a luxury he no longer possessed. The photos were grainy but unmistakable. Him and Victoria walking through Brooklyn, holding hands, kissing on a street corner under the glow of a streetlight. Someone had recognized them despite the casual clothes and unpretentious neighborhood. Someone always did. The headlines were predictable. "Former CEO Victoria Hale moves on with mystery server." "Billionaire's new romance, love or rebound?" The relationship that cost Hale Industries its visionary leader. Ethan scrolled through the comments, knowing he shouldn't, but unable to stop himself. The opinions were split almost perfectly down the middle. Half the internet thought Victoria was brave for choosing love over corporate approval. The other half thought she was reckless, that Ethan was manipulating her, that the whole thing was proof she'd been unfit to lead a company in the first place. His phone rang. "Victoria." "I saw," he said before she could speak. "I'm sorry, I thought that neighborhood was safe." "Nowhere's safe when you're you." Ethan sat up in bed, running a hand through his hair. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, annoyed but fine. My lawyers are already working on getting the photos taken down for privacy violations, though it's probably too late to contain them." She paused. "Are you okay?" "I don't know yet. Ask me after I've had coffee and figured out how to explain to Noah why people are taking pictures of us again." "Ethan, if this is too much—" "Don't," he interrupted. "Don't give me an out before we've even started. I knew what I was signing up for. I just need to adjust to the reality of it." They talked for a few more minutes before Victoria had to go deal with her lawyers. After hanging up, Ethan made coffee and checked the job search sites, trying to focus on something productive. The headhunter Victoria had connected him with had sent an email overnight. 3 schools wanted second interviews, and one had already made a preliminary offer pending background checks and references. It was good news. Great news, actually. But Ethan couldn't shake the anxiety that had settled in his chest. Every time things started looking up, something came along to tear it all back down. He'd learned not to trust stability, not to believe in happy endings, not to assume that good things would last. Noah wandered out of his bedroom at 7:30, still in his pajamas, dragging Captain behind him. "Morning, buddy," Ethan said, pouring milk into a bowl of cereal. "How'd you sleep?" Good. Can Mrs. Azusapat Hale come over again? Ethan paused mid-pour. You liked her, huh? She's nice, and she knows a lot about books, and she didn't talk to me like I'm a baby. Noah climbed onto a chair at the small kitchen table. Is she your girlfriend now? There was no point in lying. Noah was too smart and too observant, and the photos circulating online would probably make their way to his school eventually. Yeah, she is. How do you feel about that? Noah considered the question seriously while eating cereal. Is she going to live with us? No, at least not anytime soon. We're still figuring things out. But she makes you happy? The question hit Ethan unexpectedly hard. He thought about the previous night, about walking through Brooklyn with Victoria's hand in his, about feeling like maybe the future didn't have to be just survival and damage control. Yeah, he admitted. She does. Then it's okay. Noah returned his attention to breakfast as if the matter was settled. Can I have the tablet after school? The simplicity of children's logic was both beautiful and terrifying. Noah had no concept of the complications, the social barriers, the 1,000 ways this relationship could implode and hurt everyone involved. He just knew his father was happy, and that was enough. Ethan wished he could see the world that clearly. The week unfolded with surprising normalcy despite the renewed media attention. Ethan had his interviews and tried to present himself as a stable, qualified educator despite the tabloid baggage. Victoria dealt with lawyers and severance negotiations with Hale Industries while fending off interview requests from every major news outlet. They texted throughout the day and talked every night, building something that felt increasingly real. On Wednesday, Ethan got the call he'd been hoping for. The charter school in Queens wanted to offer him a position teaching 5th grade, starting the following month. The salary was nearly double what he'd made at his previous teaching job, with benefits that actually covered dental and vision. The principal mentioned that she'd spoken with Victoria's headhunter and been impressed by Ethan's references and teaching portfolio. We believe everyone deserves a second chance, the principal said, and frankly, the way you've handled yourself through this difficult situation shows character. We'd be lucky to have you. Ethan accepted on the spot. After hanging up, he sat in his apartment and let himself cry, not from sadness, but from relief so profound it felt physical. He had a real job doing something he loved. After months of uncertainty and fear, he finally had solid ground beneath him. He called Victoria immediately. I got it, he said when she answered. The teaching position, they offered it to me. Ethan, that's incredible. I knew they would. When do you start? Next month, 5th grade. It's everything I hoped for. We should celebrate. Dinner tomorrow night? I'll cook. You cook? Victoria laughed. I'm full of surprises. Come to my place at 7. And bring Noah. I want to do this properly. The next evening, Ethan stood outside Victoria's penthouse with Noah's hand in his and a bottle of wine he'd stressed over selecting for 20 minutes. This was different from the private dinners where he'd served food to her business associates. This was personal. This was introducing his son to the woman he was falling for, letting her into the most important part of his life. Victoria answered the door in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked more relaxed than Ethan had ever seen her. Come in, she said, smiling at Noah. I hope you're hungry. I might have gone overboard. The penthouse smelled like garlic and tomatoes. Noah's eyes went wide at the space and the floor-to-ceiling windows. Whoa, he breathed. You can see everything from here. Pretty cool, right? Victoria knelt down to his level. Want to help me finish dinner? I could use someone to taste test the pasta sauce. Noah looked at Ethan for permission. Ethan nodded and his son followed Victoria into the kitchen like they'd known each other for years instead of having met once briefly. Ethan trailed behind them, watching Victoria hand Noah a wooden spoon and guide him through checking if the sauce needed more basil. She was patient and encouraging, treating his opinion like it actually mattered. Noah was explaining his theory about why spaghetti was better than penne, and Victoria was listening like it was the most fascinating culinary debate she'd ever heard. Something in Ethan's chest expanded painfully. This was what he'd been terrified to hope for. Someone who didn't just tolerate Noah's presence, but genuinely enjoyed it. Someone who understood that loving Ethan meant loving his son, that they were a package deal and always would be. Dinner was surprisingly good. Victoria admitted she'd learned to cook in college when eating out every night stopped being financially viable, and she'd maintained the skill even after money was no longer an issue. It's meditative, she explained, twirling pasta on her fork. There's something satisfying about creating something with your hands instead of just signing contracts and attending meetings. Ms. Hale, why did you stop being a CEO? Noah asked with the bluntness only children possessed. Victoria and Ethan exchanged glances. They hadn't discussed how to explain the situation to Noah. Well, Victoria said carefully, sometimes people at work disagree about what's right and what's wrong, and sometimes those disagreements get so big that it's better to walk away than to keep fighting. I decided walking away was the right choice for me. Because of my dad? Noah, Ethan started, but Victoria shook her head. It's okay. He should know the truth. She looked at Noah seriously. Not because of your dad, exactly, but because some people thought I shouldn't be friends with your dad, and I disagreed. I wasn't willing to pretend I agreed with them just to keep my job. Does that make sense? Noah considered this. Like when Tommy said I couldn't be friends with Miguel because Miguel's family doesn't have a lot of money, and I said that was stupid and mean. Exactly like that. You did the right thing then, Noah declared. Tommy was being a jerk. Victoria smiled. Thank you. I think so too. After dinner, Victoria showed Noah her book collection, an entire room lined with shelves containing everything from classic literature to graphic novels. Noah was in heaven, pulling books down and asking questions about every third title. Victoria answered patiently, making recommendations and promising to lend him whatever he wanted. Ethan stood in the doorway watching them, his heart doing complicated things in his chest. This could be his life. This warmth, this ease, this feeling of pieces fitting together despite all logic saying they shouldn't. But accepting it meant trusting that good things could last, and his experience had taught him the opposite. You okay? Victoria appeared beside him, her hand finding his. Yeah, just processing. It's a lot, I know. If this is moving too fast, it's not that, it's just… Ethan struggled to find words. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong and prove that people like me don't get this kind of happiness. Victoria squeezed his hand. People like you? People with my history, my baggage, my complete lack of anything to offer someone like you except complications and a 5-year-old who needs constant attention. Ethan, look at me. She turned him to face her directly. You're offering me something I haven't had in years. Honesty. Realness. Someone who sees past the money and the reputation to the person underneath. That's not nothing. That's everything. Noah called from the other room, asking if he could take home the book about dragons. Victoria called back yes, and the moment passed, but Ethan carried her words with him for the rest of the evening. They stayed until Noah started yawning, then gathered their things to leave. Victoria walked them to the door, hugging Noah goodnight and kissing Ethan with a tenderness that made him forget to be afraid. Same time next week? She asked. Absolutely. On the subway ride home, Noah fell asleep against Ethan's shoulder, clutching his new dragon book. Ethan looked at his son and thought about the life they were building, brick by brick, in defiance of everyone who said it couldn't work. The next few weeks established a pattern. Ethan started his teaching job and fell back in love with the chaos of fifth graders who asked a million questions and made him laugh daily. Noah thrived in his new school, making friends and bringing home artwork that Victoria insisted on displaying in her penthouse. Victoria consulted with her lawyers about starting a new venture, something smaller and more personal than Hale Industries, a company focused on affordable housing development. They saw each other 3 or 4 times a week, alternating between Victoria's place and family-friendly activities around the city. Museums, parks, the occasional movie. They were building a relationship in full view of anyone who cared to watch, and slowly the media attention began to fade as newer scandals captured the internet's attention span. But Marcus Renton wasn't finished. The lawsuit Victoria had filed against him was still pending, scheduled for trial in 6 months. His countersuit claimed defamation and sought damages for the harm to his reputation. It was all standard legal maneuvering until Marcus's lawyers filed a new motion that changed everything. Martin called Ethan on a Tuesday afternoon while he was supervising recess. Mr. Walker, I apologize for the interruption, but Miss Hale asked me to inform you immediately. Marcus Renton's legal team has filed for emergency custody evaluation concerning Noah. Ethan's blood went cold. What? They're claiming that Ms. Hale's presence in Noah's life constitutes an unstable environment, and that your judgment as a parent has been compromised by your relationship with her. They've petitioned family court to investigate whether Noah should be placed in protective services pending psychological evaluation. The playground noise faded to white static. They can't do that. They can't just, Noah is fine, he's happy and healthy, and I know, Ms. Hale's lawyers are already preparing a response. But she wanted you to be aware so you're not blindsided if Child Services contacts you. This is insane. Marcus is using my son as a weapon because his other tactics failed. Yes, that's exactly what he's doing, and it's despicable. But the court still has to investigate any formal complaint, regardless of the motivation behind it. I'm very sorry, Mr. Walker. Ethan ended the call and stood frozen on the playground, watching his students play tag and argue over the swings, completely oblivious to the fact that their teacher's world was imploding. Again. He called Victoria during his lunch break. "I'm going to end this," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "I'm going to destroy him so completely that he'll regret ever learning my name." "Victoria, he's going after my son. Noah is 5 years old, and Marcus is dragging him into family court because we had the audacity to fall for each other." "I know. And I will fix this. I promise you, Ethan, I will not let him hurt Noah." "How? How can you stop a family court investigation? How can you prevent some social worker from deciding that dating you makes me an unfit parent?" "By being honest. By showing them that Noah is thriving, that our relationship is healthy and stable, that Marcus is manipulating the system for revenge. My lawyers are the best in the city. They'll handle this." But Ethan couldn't shake the fear that had settled deep in his bones. He'd already lost Sarah. He'd lost his career once and rebuilt it. He'd survived poverty and scandal and public humiliation. But losing Noah? That was a line he couldn't come back from. That evening, a woman from Child Protective Services showed up at his apartment unannounced. She was professional and apologetic, explaining that she was required to conduct a preliminary home visit based on the complaint filed. Ethan showed her around the apartment, the clean, safe space where Noah had his own bedroom, where the refrigerator was stocked with healthy food, where everything was age-appropriate and well-maintained. He showed her Noah's school records indicating perfect attendance and good grades. He answered questions about his work schedule, his childcare arrangements, his relationship with Victoria. "And how often does Ms. Hale interact with your son?" the social worker asked, taking notes. "A few times a week. We have dinner together. She's teaching him about literature and architecture. She's kind to him." "Has she ever been inappropriate with Noah in any way?" The question made Ethan's jaw clench. "No, never. She treats him with respect and care. Noah adores her." The social worker nodded, writing everything down. "Mr. Walker, I want to be clear. This seems like a very stable home environment. From what I've observed, Noah appears healthy and well-adjusted. But I do need to conduct a formal interview with him and with Ms. Hale before I can close this investigation. I'll be in touch to schedule those." After she left, Ethan sat on the couch and put his head in his hands. Noah was at Mrs. Chen's for the evening, blissfully unaware that strangers were questioning whether his father was capable of caring for him. Victoria arrived an hour later, letting herself in with the key Ethan had given her 2 weeks ago. She didn't say anything, just sat beside him and pulled him against her shoulder. "I'm scared," Ethan admitted. "I've never been this scared." "I know, but Noah is your son, and you're an excellent father. No court is going to take him away from you based on Marcus's lies." "You don't know that. The system isn't designed to be fair, it's designed to be cautious. And cautious means they might decide that a single father dating a controversial billionaire is too much risk." Victoria was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady and determined. "Then I'll step back." Ethan lifted his head to look at her. "What?" "If our relationship is what's putting Noah at risk, I'll step back. We can pause this until the investigation is over and Marcus's lawsuit is resolved. I won't let my presence in your life cost you your son." "Victoria, no." "Ethan, listen to me. I care about you. I'm falling in love with you if I'm being honest, but Noah comes first. He has to come first. If the price of being together right now is risking his stability, then it's too high." Tears burned in Ethan's eyes. "I don't want to lose you either." "You won't. This is just temporary. We'll get through the investigation, prove Marcus is full of it, and then we can be together without this hanging over us. But right now we need to protect Noah. That's what matters most. Ethan knew she was right. He hated it, but she was right. Noah's well-being had to come before their relationship, before everything else. That's what being a parent meant. Okay, he said quietly. We pause. But Victoria, the minute this is over, I'm not letting you go again. That's a promise. She kissed him one more time, soft and sad and full of everything they weren't saying out loud. Then she left, and Ethan sat alone in his apartment, feeling like Marcus had finally found the one attack that would actually break him. The investigation moved forward with bureaucratic efficiency. The social worker interviewed Noah, who cheerfully reported that his dad was the best, and that Ms. Hale knew everything about dragons and sometimes brought him books. She interviewed Mrs. Chen, who defended Ethan as a devoted father who'd sacrificed everything for his son. She interviewed Noah's teachers, who had nothing but positive things to say about his adjustment and development. Victoria submitted to her own interview, answering questions about her relationship with Ethan and Noah with calm professionalism. She provided financial records showing she'd never given Ethan money beyond fair payment for work performed. She provided character references from people who'd known her for decades. She was transparent and cooperative, giving them no reason to doubt her intentions. 2 weeks into the investigation, the social worker called Ethan with her preliminary findings. Mr. Walker, I wanted to inform you that I'll be recommending the complaint be dismissed. My investigation found no evidence of neglect, instability, or inappropriate behavior. Noah is clearly thriving in your care, and your relationship with Ms. Hale appears healthy and appropriate. I'll be submitting my report to the court tomorrow. Relief flooded through Ethan so intensely he had to sit down. Thank you so much. I'm sorry you had to go through this process. It's clear the complaint was filed with ulterior motives. I hope whoever did this faces consequences. After the call ended, Ethan immediately phoned Victoria. It's over, he told her. The investigation is being dismissed. They found nothing wrong. He heard her exhale, a sound that might have been tears or laughter, or both. Thank God. Is Noah okay? He's fine. He barely noticed anything was happening. Kids are resilient like that. And you? Are you okay? I will be, especially now that I can see you again without worrying it'll be used against me. Dinner tonight? Victoria asked. My place? I've missed you. We've talked every day. I know, but I've missed you. There's a difference. Ethan smiled for the first time in 2 weeks. Dinner sounds perfect. That evening, he stood outside Victoria's penthouse again, but this time without Noah, without the pretense of casual friendship, without anything between them except the truth of what they felt. She opened the door and pulled him inside, kissing him before he could even say hello. They stood in her foyer holding each other, not speaking, just being together after weeks of forced distance. I meant what I said, Victoria murmured against his shoulder. I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I think I'm already there. Ethan pulled back to look at her. I love you too. I think I have for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it. Are you still scared? Terrified. But I'm done letting fear make my decisions. He touched her face gently. Marcus tried to take everything from both of us. And he failed. We're still here. We're still together. That has to mean something. It means we're stronger than he thought. Stronger than anyone thought. They ordered takeout because neither wanted to waste time cooking. They ate on Victoria's couch and talked about the future, about Ethan's students and Victoria's new company, about Noah's upcoming birthday and whether they should take a trip somewhere next summer. They talked about mundane, beautiful, normal things that people in love talked about when they weren't constantly fighting for survival. Later, after Victoria had fallen asleep against his shoulder and the city lights glittered through the windows, Ethan thought about the unlikely path that had brought them here. A spilled water pitcher, a scandal that had cost them both everything, a choice to protect each other instead of themselves. It shouldn't have worked. By every logical measure, a struggling single father and a billionaire CEO had no business building a life together. The world had told them so repeatedly, loudly, viciously, but they'd done it anyway. And they'd survived. Ethan shifted carefully, letting Victoria settle more comfortably against him, and allowed himself to believe that maybe happy endings weren't just for other people. Maybe they were possible for anyone brave enough to fight for them. His phone buzzed with a text from Martin. Ms. Hale's lawyers have received confirmation that Marcus Renton's custody complaint has been formally dismissed with prejudice. He cannot refile. You and Noah are safe. Ethan closed his eyes and finally, truly, let himself breathe. 3 months after the custody complaint was dismissed, Marcus Renton's legal fortress began to crumble in earnest. The trial for Victoria's harassment and defamation lawsuit started on a Monday morning in October, the kind of crisp autumn day that made New York feel almost manageable. Ethan had taken personal time from school to attend, sitting in the gallery behind Victoria's legal team while Marcus sat across the aisle with his lawyers, looking confident in a way that made Ethan's stomach tight with anger. The evidence was damning. Victoria's lawyers presented the paper trail methodically, emails between Marcus and the private investigator, payment records totaling over $300,000, text messages coordinating the release of information to tabloids, communications proving Marcus had orchestrated every aspect of the scandal from the surveillance to the leaked financial records. Mr. Renton knew exactly what he was doing, Victoria's lead attorney argued during opening statements. This wasn't concern for a vulnerable person. This was calculated revenge against a woman who refused to be controlled by him. He weaponized the media, manipulated public perception, and deliberately destroyed 2 innocent people's reputations because his ex-girlfriend had the audacity to move on with her life. Marcus's defense was predictable. They painted him as a whistleblower, someone who'd noticed concerning behavior and felt obligated to investigate. They claimed his actions were motivated by genuine worry about power imbalances and exploitation, not revenge. But the evidence made liars of them all. On the 3rd day of trial, the photographer Marcus had hired took the stand. Under oath, he admitted Marcus had specifically requested surveillance of Victoria's penthouse, had paid bonuses for photos that looked intimate or compromising, and had coached him on timing the leaks for maximum damage. He told me he wanted to destroy her credibility, the photographer testified, avoiding Marcus's glare from across the courtroom. He said if he couldn't have Hale Industries, he'd make sure she couldn't either. This was never about protecting anyone. It was about revenge. Ethan watched Marcus's face tighten with barely controlled rage. This was a man who'd built his entire identity on being smarter than everyone else, on manipulating situations to his advantage. Watching him lose control of the narrative must have been torture. Victoria was called to testify on the 4th day. She walked to the witness stand with the same controlled grace she brought to everything, her posture perfect, her voice steady as she was sworn in. Her attorney led her through the timeline, how she'd met Ethan, why she'd hired him for private dinners, the nature of their relationship before and after the scandal broke. She was honest about everything, including her feelings. I cared about him, Victoria said, looking directly at the jury. Not because he needed saving or because I had some hero complex, but because he was kind and honest and treated me like a person instead of a bank account. That shouldn't be revolutionary, but in my world it was. Marcus's attorney tried to trip her up during cross-examination, suggesting she'd been inappropriate with an employee, that she'd used her wealth to manipulate Ethan, that her judgment had been compromised by loneliness. Victoria didn't flinch. Mr. Walker was hired for legitimate work and compensated fairly. When our professional relationship evolved into a personal one, I made sure there was no ongoing employment dynamic that could create pressure or obligation. I've made many mistakes in my life, but pursuing a relationship with Ethan Walker isn't one of them. Even though that relationship cost you your company? I left my company, Victoria corrected. I wasn't willing to denounce a good man to satisfy a board that cared more about appearance than ethics. That was my choice, and I stand by it. Ethan felt something swell in his chest, pride, love, gratitude that this woman had chosen him over everything else she'd built. The defense called Ethan to testify on day 6. He'd been dreading this moment, the public examination of his life and choices, but Victoria's attorney had prepared him well. Marcus's lawyer tried to paint him as desperate and opportunistic, someone who'd seen Victoria's wealth as an escape from his problems. But Ethan had receipts, texts showing he'd tried to refuse excessive payment, emails documenting his concerns about the appearance of their relationship, testimony from Martin confirming Ethan had never asked Victoria for anything beyond what he'd earned. Mr. Walker, isn't it true that you accepted an apartment from Ms. Hale worth approximately $2 million? I accepted temporary housing during a crisis that Mr. Renton created, Ethan corrected. I was being evicted because of media attention directly caused by his surveillance and harassment. Ms. Hale offered a safe place for my son until the situation stabilized. I would have done the same for anyone I cared about if I had the resources. But you don't have resources. You're a school teacher with significant debt. Doesn't that create an inherent power imbalance in your relationship with Ms. Hale? Ethan looked at the jury, then back at the attorney. I was a server when we met. She was a billionaire. By that logic, I shouldn't be allowed to have a relationship with anyone who makes more money than I do. That's not protecting vulnerable people. That's deciding poor people don't deserve love unless it comes from someone equally broke. I won't accept that premise. He saw several jury members nod slightly. The attorney moved on to other questions, but the damage to Marcus's narrative was done. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning with their verdict. Guilty on all counts. Harassment, defamation, conspiracy to interfere with business relationships, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The judge awarded Victoria $3 million in compensatory damages and another $5 million in punitive damages, citing the calculated maliciousness of Marcus's actions. She also issued a permanent restraining order preventing Marcus from contacting either Victoria or Ethan. But the real victory came in the judge's final statement before dismissing the court. Mr. Renton, you came into this courtroom claiming you were protecting the vulnerable from exploitation. The evidence has shown conclusively that you were the one doing the exploiting. You used the media as a weapon, you manipulated public opinion, and you attempted to destroy 2 people's lives because your ego couldn't accept rejection. This court finds your actions reprehensible and hopes this verdict serves as a warning to others who might consider similar behavior. Ethan watched Marcus's face crumble, watched the reality of his defeat sink in. The man who'd tried to take everything from them was being publicly humiliated, his reputation shredded, his future prospects dimmed. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, Ethan just felt tired. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them with questions. Victoria's lawyer gave a brief statement about justice being served and their clients being vindicated. Victoria herself said nothing, just took Ethan's hand and walked to the waiting car while cameras flashed around them. Once inside, she let out a long breath and leaned against Ethan's shoulder. "It's over," she said softly. "It's actually over." "How do you feel?" "Relieved, exhausted, angry that we had to go through any of this in the first place." She turned to look at him. "How about you?" "The same, but also grateful. If Marcus hadn't tried to destroy us, we might have kept circling each other forever, too scared to actually try. In a weird way, he forced us to commit or walk away. And we chose each other." Victoria kissed him, not caring that the car was pulling into traffic or that her lawyer was sitting in the front seat trying to pretend he wasn't there. "We should celebrate," she said when they broke apart. "Dinner somewhere nice. Maybe invite Noah?" "Noah's on a field trip today, won't be home until late, so it's just us." Even better. They ended up at the same small Brooklyn restaurant where they'd had their first real date. The owner recognized them and gave them the booth in the back, the same one they'd sat in months ago when everything was new and terrifying and uncertain. "Do you remember what you asked me that night?" Victoria said over wine. "About whether I regretted meeting you?" "I remember. You said no. I want to ask you the same question now. After everything, the scandal, the harassment, Marcus trying to take Noah, the trial, all of it. Do you regret meeting me?" Ethan thought about the question seriously. He thought about the jobs he'd lost, the invasion of privacy, the fear that had consumed him during the custody investigation. He thought about the pain and uncertainty and constant pressure. Then he thought about Victoria reading bedtime stories to Noah in funny voices, about her listening to his students' names and remembering them when she asked how his day went, about the way she'd stood by him when walking away would have been easier, about falling asleep next to someone who made him believe in futures that included happiness instead of just survival. "No," he said firmly. "I don't regret it. Not for a second." "Good, because I'm about to ask you something, and I need you to know I'm asking because I want to, not because I feel obligated or guilty or any other complicated emotion." Ethan's heart rate picked up. "Okay." Victoria reached across the table and took both his hands in hers. "Move in with me. You and Noah. Not because the apartment in Brooklyn isn't enough, or because I'm trying to control things, but because I hate going to sleep without you. Because I love having Noah's artwork on my refrigerator and his books scattered across my living room. Because I want us to be a family, officially and completely. The request hit Ethan like a wave. He'd thought about this, fantasized about it in quiet moments, but hearing Victoria say it out loud made it real and terrifying and wonderful all at once. Victoria, that's a huge step. I know, and if you're not ready, I understand, but I am. I'm ready to build a life with you, whatever that looks like. What about Noah? This isn't just about us anymore. If we do this and it doesn't work out, he's the one who gets hurt. Then we make sure it works out, we communicate, we're honest. We put his needs first and figure out everything else as we go. Victoria's grip on his hands tightened. Ethan, I know you're scared. I know your experience has taught you that good things don't last. But I'm asking you to trust me. Trust us. Trust that what we have is strong enough to survive whatever comes next. Ethan looked at this woman who'd given up an empire rather than pretend she didn't care about him, who'd fought Marcus tooth and nail to protect his son, who'd proven over and over that she wasn't going anywhere no matter how hard things got. I need to talk to Noah first, he said. This affects him as much as us. If he's not comfortable, then we wait until he is. I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. I'll wait as long as you need. They finished dinner and went back to Victoria's penthouse, where they sat on the couch and talked about logistics and timelines and how to make this transition as smooth as possible for Noah. It was practical and unromantic and exactly what Ethan needed, proof that Victoria understood this wasn't a fairy tale, but a real relationship that required work and compromise and putting a 5-year-old's stability above their own desires. The next evening, Ethan sat Noah down for a serious conversation. Buddy, I need to talk to you about something important. You know how Ms. Hale and I have been spending a lot of time together? Because she's your girlfriend, Noah said matter-of-factly. Right. Well, she asked if we'd like to move in with her, into her apartment. What do you think about that? Noah's face scrunched up in thought. Would I still go to my same school? Yes. We'd get you there the same way we do now. Would Mrs. Chen still watch me sometimes? Absolutely. Nothing about your routine has to change except where we sleep. Would I get my own room? Ethan smiled. Yes. A bigger one than you have now, actually. Noah was quiet for a long moment, working through the implications with the seriousness he brought to all major decisions. Is Ms. Hale going to be like a mom? He asked finally, his voice small. The question punched Ethan in the chest. Noah rarely talked about Sarah, but the absence of a mother was always there, a hole in his life that nothing could quite fill. She's not trying to replace your mom, Ethan said carefully. Nobody could do that. But she cares about you a lot, and she wants to be part of our family. Would that be okay with you? I guess. Noah fidgeted with Captain's ear. I like her. She's nice to me and she doesn't lie. And she makes you happy. You smile more now. I do? Yeah, before Ms. Hale you were always tired and worried. Now you're still tired sometimes, but you smile more. I like when you smile. Ethan pulled his son into a tight hug, overwhelmed by the simple wisdom of children who noticed everything even when you thought they weren't paying attention. So we can try it? He asked. If you don't like it, we can always move back out and find our own place. This isn't permanent unless we all want it to be. Okay. Can I bring all my books? Every single one. They moved in 3 weeks later with help from Martin and Mrs. Chen and a couple of Ethan's colleagues from school. Victoria had converted one of her guest rooms into a space specifically for Noah, with shelves for his books, a desk for homework, and a window seat that looked out over the city. She'd even found a poster of dragons to hang on the wall, remembering his obsession from months ago. Noah loved it immediately, running from room to room, exploring while Ethan unpacked boxes and tried to wrap his head around the fact that this was real. He was living with Victoria Hale. His son was safe and happy. They were building something that looked remarkably like a family. That first night, after Noah was asleep in his new room, Ethan and Victoria sat on the balcony overlooking the city. Thank you, Ethan said quietly, for the room, for making space for us, for everything. You don't have to thank me for wanting you here. This is where you belong. Victoria leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. How are you feeling? Honestly? terrified, happy, like I'm waiting for someone to tell me this isn't allowed. It's allowed. We're allowed to be happy, Ethan. Even after everything we've been through, especially after everything we've been through. They sat in comfortable silence, watching lights flicker across Manhattan's skyline. Somewhere out there, Marcus Renton was probably plotting his appeal or nursing his wounded pride. Somewhere out there, people were still talking about the scandal, still having opinions about whether a billionaire and a schoolteacher had any business being together. But up here, 40 stories above the noise and judgment, none of that mattered. What mattered was Noah sleeping safely in the next room. What mattered was Victoria's hand in his and the future they were choosing to build together. The months that followed weren't perfect. They had arguments about parenting styles and whose turn it was to handle bedtime. They navigated the awkwardness of merging households and figuring out how to split responsibilities when one person had unlimited resources and the other was still paying down debt. They dealt with stares in public and occasional comments from strangers who recognized them from the trial coverage. But they also had breakfast together every morning, all three of them crowded around Victoria's kitchen island while Noah narrated his dreams and Victoria made pancakes that were only slightly burned. They had movie nights where Victoria let Noah pick films she'd normally never watch, sitting through animated adventures with surprising enthusiasm. They had quiet evenings after Noah was asleep, talking about their days and making plans for a future that felt increasingly solid. Victoria's new company, Hale Housing Development, took off faster than anyone expected. Her focus on affordable housing and ethical development practices attracted investors who'd been waiting for someone to prove that profit and principles weren't mutually exclusive. Within a year, she'd completed 3 major projects in Brooklyn and Queens, creating hundreds of units priced for actual working families instead of just the ultra-wealthy. Ethan thrived in his teaching position, earning recognition for his innovative approach to literacy education and his ability to connect with students from difficult backgrounds. He paid off his medical debt ahead of schedule and started a college fund for Noah, small contributions that added up to hope for a future where his son wouldn't be crushed by the same financial pressures. Noah grew and changed, losing teeth and gaining confidence, making friends and discovering passions. He started calling Victoria by her first name without the Miss prefix, a small shift that felt monumental. He drew pictures of their family. Always 3 people now, sometimes with Captain the Bear, sometimes with Mrs. Chen added in for good measure. 18 months after they moved in together, Ethan woke on a Sunday morning to find Noah standing by the bed, clutching Captain and looking serious. "Daddy, is Victoria going to marry us?" Ethan sat up, trying to clear the sleep from his brain. "That's a big question for 7 in the morning, buddy. Tommy's dad is getting married, and Tommy says that means his dad is making a new family. Are we making a new family?" "We already are a family, the 3 of us. But like an official family, with a wedding and everything." Ethan looked over at Victoria, who was pretending to be asleep but couldn't quite hide her smile. "Would you want that?" Ethan asked his son. "If Victoria and I got married?" Noah thought about it with his characteristic seriousness. "Would she be my mom then?" "She could be, if you wanted her to be. You'd still remember your first mom. Nobody could replace her. But Victoria could be your mom in a different way." "Okay," Noah decided. "Then yes, I want an official family." He climbed onto the bed between them, satisfied that the matter was settled, and demanded pancakes. After breakfast, after Noah was occupied with building an elaborate Lego city in the living room, Victoria pulled Ethan onto the balcony. "So," she said, fighting a smile, "apparently we need to make this official." "Apparently so. Noah has spoken." "Is that the only reason you'd marry me? Because our son decreed it?" Ethan pulled her close, one hand cupping her face. "I'd marry you because you're the bravest person I know, because you chose integrity over safety, because you love my son like he's yours, because you make me believe in futures I thought I'd lost the right to dream about." "Those are pretty good reasons." "What about you? Why would you marry me?" Victoria pretended to think about it. "Well, you make terrible coffee. You leave books everywhere. You cry at animated movies that aren't even that sad." "I'm asking why you would marry me, not why you shouldn't." "Because you see me, Ethan. Not the money or the reputation or the scandal. Just me. That's all I've ever wanted, someone who sees me and chooses me anyway." She kissed him softly. "So yes, I'll marry you, if you're asking." I'm asking. Though I should probably get a ring first, and do this properly. I don't need proper. I just need you. But Ethan did it properly anyway. 2 weeks later, he took Noah to a jewelry store and let his son help pick out a ring. A simple band with small diamonds that Victoria would actually wear instead of something ostentatious she'd hide in a drawer. He planned an evening at the Brooklyn restaurant where they'd had their first date, arranged for Mrs. Chen to watch Noah, and tried not to be obviously nervous through dinner. Victoria knew something was up. She kept giving him amused looks, clearly enjoying his anxiety. Finally, over dessert, Ethan pulled out the ring. I had a whole speech planned, he said, about journeys and unexpected paths and finding love in the middle of chaos. But the truth is simpler than that. You're my best friend. You're the person I want to talk to about everything and nothing. You make me braver and happier and better than I am alone. Will you marry me? Victoria was crying, which he'd never seen her do in public. Yes, obviously yes. The ring fit perfectly. They kissed while the other diners applauded, and the owner sent over champagne on the house. And for once, the attention felt celebratory instead of invasive. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at Brooklyn Botanical Garden, surrounded by close friends and people who'd stood by them through the worst. Mrs. Chen cried through the entire ceremony. Martin served as Victoria's best man, which made her lawyers mildly scandalized and made Martin actually smile for once. Ethan's colleagues from school attended, along with several of his students' families who'd become friends. Noah was the ring bearer, taking his responsibility with extreme seriousness. He wore a miniature suit and carried the rings on a pillow, walking down the aisle with careful steps while guests tried not to laugh at his concentration. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, Noah raised his hand. I object, he announced loudly. Ethan's heart stopped. Victoria looked panicked. Why, young man? The officiant asked, clearly trying not to smile. Because Daddy promised me cake after this, and everyone's taking too long. Can we get to the cake part? The guests erupted in laughter. The officiant assured Noah the cake would happen very soon, and the ceremony continued. Ethan stood at the altar holding Victoria's hands, looking at this woman who'd fought for him when it would have been easier to walk away, and felt something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe, or just the absence of fear that had defined his life for so long. I love you, he whispered, while the officiant was reading the formal parts. I love you too, Victoria whispered back, even though our son just interrupted our wedding for cake. He has his priorities straight. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Ethan promised to always choose her, to build a life of honesty and partnership, to remember that love was an action and not just a feeling. Victoria promised to stand beside him, to honor his strength and protect his softness, to be the family he and Noah deserved. When the officiant pronounced them married, they kissed while their guests cheered and Noah yelled, "Cake now!" And somewhere in Manhattan, life went on without them because they'd finally learned that their happiness didn't require anyone else's permission. The reception was simple and joyful. They cut the cake, Noah got the first piece as promised, and danced and took photos that would fill albums for years to come. Ethan danced with Victoria, while Noah danced with Mrs. Chen, and later he danced with his son, while Victoria watched with tears in her eyes. Are you happy, Daddy? Noah asked while they swayed to music he was mostly ignoring. Happier than I've ever been. Good, because I like this family. Me too, buddy. Me too. 3 years later, Ethan sat in the same Brooklyn park where he'd once watched Noah play while stress ate him alive, worrying about rent and jobs and how to survive another month. But today, he wasn't stressed. Today, he was watching Noah, now 8 years old and missing both front teeth, play soccer with kids from his school while Victoria sat beside him on the bench, her hand in his. You're quiet, she said. Everything okay? Just thinking about how different life is now. Better different or worse different? Definitely better. Ethan squeezed her hand. You know what occurred to me? If I hadn't spilled that water 3 years ago, none of this would exist. We'd have never talked. Noah wouldn't have you. I'd probably still be working 3 jobs and drowning. But you didn't spill the water. The new server did. You just took the blame. Best decision I ever made. Second best, Victoria corrected. The best was saying yes when I asked you to move in. I don't know. Marrying you was pretty high up there too. Noah scored a goal and turned to wave at them, his grin showing the gaps where his teeth used to be. They waved back, Two parents celebrating their son's small victory like it was the most important thing in the world, because it was. Not the goal itself, but the fact that Noah felt safe enough to play without fear, secure enough to celebrate without wondering if joy was something he was allowed to have. That safety had been won through hard choices and harder fights, through standing up when it would have been easier to fold, through believing that people like them, people who didn't fit the expected molds, deserved love and dignity and respect. Do you ever wonder what happened to Marcus? Victoria asked, watching Noah return to the game. Not really. I heard he filed bankruptcy last year after the appeals failed and his business ventures collapsed. Part of me feels like I should care, but mostly I just don't. That's healthier than hating him. I figured out that hating him was giving him power he didn't deserve. He tried to destroy us and failed. That's enough revenge for me. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Noah play, watching Brooklyn move around them with its chaotic energy. The city that had witnessed their worst moments was now witnessing their best. A family built from scandal and survival, from choosing each other when the world said they shouldn't, from believing that love could be stronger than reputation or status or fear. I'm proud of us, Victoria said quietly, for fighting through all of it, for being here. Me too. And I'm proud of you for going back to teaching, for showing Noah what integrity looks like, for being exactly who you are without apology. Ethan leaned over and kissed her, not caring that other parents were around or that someone might recognize them and post about it online. They'd lived through worse than gossip. They'd survived attempts to tear them apart. A few whispers couldn't touch them anymore. Want to get ice cream after this? He asked when they broke apart. Always. But Noah's picking the flavors this time. That's a dangerous game. We're good at dangerous games. We won the biggest one. The soccer game ended. Noah ran over, sweaty and grass-stained and radiating joy. Did you see my goal? He demanded. We saw, Ethan confirmed. You were amazing. Can we get ice cream? I want 3 scoops. 2 scoops, Victoria negotiated, but you can pick both flavors. Deal. They walked through Brooklyn together, 3 people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and decided to become a family despite every obstacle thrown in their path. The city stretched around them, full of other people fighting their own battles, building their own lives, searching for their own versions of happiness. Ethan thought about the server he'd been, exhausted, terrified, convinced that good things only happened to other people. He thought about the morning Victoria Hale had walked into Aurelius and changed everything. He thought about all the moments between then and now, the choices that had led them here. And he thought about the future, teaching Noah to drive someday, watching him graduate, being there for all the moments that made up a life. Growing old with Victoria, building something that lasted not because it was perfect, but because they kept choosing it, kept fighting for it, kept believing it was worth the effort. I love you, he said, to both of them, to his whole family. We love you too, Victoria answered, with Noah echoing her a beat later. They got their ice cream. Noah chose mint chocolate chip and cookie dough, an objectively terrible combination that he insisted was perfect, and walked home through streets that had witnessed their transformation from scandal to family. The evening sun painted Brooklyn in shades of gold, and somewhere in the distance the city hummed with life and possibility. Ethan Walker had started as a man just trying to survive, invisible to everyone except those who needed his labor. He'd become someone who mattered, not because of wealth or status, but because he'd chosen integrity over convenience, love over safety, hope over fear. And Victoria Hale had started as a woman who'd built walls so high that nothing could hurt her, convinced that relationships were liabilities and love was weakness. She'd become someone who understood that true strength meant being vulnerable, that real power came from choosing people over empires, that happiness wasn't found at the top of a corporate tower, but in small moments with people who saw her for who she really was. Together, they'd proven that the world was wrong about who deserved love and where it could be found. They'd shown that class and circumstance didn't determine worth, that scandal couldn't destroy what was built on truth, that families could be made from choice as much as blood. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better, a testament to resilience, to fighting for what mattered, to refusing to accept that their happiness was something they needed permission to pursue. As they reached their building and rode the elevator up to the penthouse that had become home, Ethan realized he'd stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. He'd stopped expecting disaster around every corner. He'd finally learned to trust that good things could last, that love could be stable, that the family they'd built was strong enough to weather whatever storms came next, because they'd already survived the worst. Everything after this was just living, beautiful, complicated, ordinary living with people who chose each other every single day. And that was more than enough. It was everything.